All right, we are live.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here for the 2022 Asheville Urban Forestry Commission Annual Planning Retreat. We have most of our commission members here as well as some special guests. And I just want to point out that people will be rotating through and I'll try to grab them for introductions as we get people joining as we go along. But we'll start with calling this meeting to order. And since it's not a regular meeting, we're not approving any minutes from previous. I did want to point out just real quick on the agenda, if anyone's looking at it, there's an error in the listed board members. Stephen Hendricks is no longer on the commission, and we do instead have Zoe Hoyle. So we'll correct that.
It's already been corrected and updated and posted to the web.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So let's start with introductions. My name is Amy Smith. I'm the chair of the Urban Forestry Commission. I'm just going to kind of go around as I see people here on my screen, but I will start with Dawn Chavez is the vice chair.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dawn Chavez. I'm the executive director of Asheville Greenworks. Nice to see you all.
And see Patrick.
Patrick Gilbert, member of the Urban Forestry Commission.
Zoe.
Zoe Hoyle, new member of the Urban Forestry Commission.
And Sharon.
Sharon Summerall, Urban Forestry Commission, TRC representative.
Thank you. And Ed.
Ed Macy, Tree Protection Task Force and Urban Forestry Commission.
All right, thank you. Cecil Bothwell is not here. I haven't heard from him. And Perrin DeYoung will be here later in our meeting. So those are the commission members. So we also have some city staff here today. So if you want to introduce yourselves, Haley.
Haley Mahoney. I work for Development Services Department as a planning technician.
Thank you. And Nancy.
I'm Nancy Watford. I'm the stormwater supervisor and staff liaison to Urban Forestry Commission.
Thanks. And Ben.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Ben Woody, Development Services Department.
Let's see, Chris Collins.
Good afternoon. I'm Chris Collins with the Planning Development Division of Development Services.
All right, thanks. And then I see a caller. Is the caller here from city staff or is that the, no, that's not the YouTube. Caller? That's okay.
That is the YouTube connection.
It is? Oh, okay. Well, then they won't say anything. Okay, thank you. All right, then we have with us today some special guests who are here with Planet Geo to give us a special presentation that'll kick off our meeting. So, so I'll just go around. You guys can introduce yourselves. But I see Rachel, Matt, and Chris. If you guys want to just say hey.
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name's Rachel Ormseth. I'm based out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I'm an urban forestry solutions consultant here at PG. I've been here for just over 6 months, and I work on Chris's team. I'll be giving the majority of the presentation today, but I really look forward to chatting with you guys and just sharing more information with you.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. And Chris Pfeiffer here, Director of Urban Forestry Consulting. So I oversee our management planning services for Planet Geo, and going on 8 years as with Planet Geo, working with small and large cities across the country, whether it be a new program just hitting the ground and providing guidance, or a robust program that's been around for years looking for improvements in workflows and efficiencies and the goal of sustainable urban forests. We provide all different types of services. So I'll do a quick intro of the presentation, but like Rachel said, she'll lead the main discussion and then can be here for answering any questions or addressing comments. So thanks for the invitation.
I'm Matt Swanson. I'm the account executive here at Planet Geo, and I'll be sitting in today and taking notes and helping process with Chris and Rachel.
All right, thank you. Good to see you all. And thank you once again for joining us and giving us some insights and information into the work that you do. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we get started with presentations? We're ready to go? All right. I think if Nancy or Haley have the slides, hopefully the updated slide deck. So give us a minute. We'll get that loaded up, and then you all can take it away.
You want to show the slides?
I don't know. It's up to you. I don't know if if you all want to run the slides, you're welcome to, or we can run them either way.
I was going to say I have them up, so if you want me to just share my screen, I can do that.
You can.
It's probably better. I have a PDF only, so.
Oh, okay.
Either way, it's up to you.
Go ahead then, Rachel, if you got it ready.
Okay.
All right, and while Rachel pulls that up, I just wanted to give a brief introduction and looking at what the presentation is going to cover. And Rachel will go through and discuss some of the trends in urban forestry and how some of the rising concerns or long-term concerns that have been identified in cities, how they can be addressed with urban forest management planning. And so we look at the structure for management and master plans and how we apply data and community engagement and city workflows to develop a realistic plan. And these can be, 5-year plans up to 40-year plans with a long-term vision in mind. It really depends on the city and the urban forest needs. And through the planning process, we come up with a strategy on how to best develop a plan for a community. And so Rachel's just going to go through some of the key elements to those discussions, and then we'll be here for any questions and comments to go into more detail on what she presents. So I'll turn it over to Rachel now, and I'll be here listening in to help with any of the discussions. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chris. We'll just keep on moving here. So we already did introductions of ourselves, but I wanted to make sure that we had a little fun. And within your guys' chat box, I'm super curious to see what everybody's favorite tree is. It might be cheesy, but we really like to do it. And I know for me, mine is Northern Catalpa. It's one of the few trees here in South Dakota that actually looks a little different, has beautiful flowers, just looks different than all the other trees we have here. So I just think it's kind of fun. We can get to know each other a little bit more. But as I mentioned, I'm based out of Sioux Falls, and just a little more background on me. I went to school for horticulture, and I actually worked for the state of South Dakota for like 6 years. And within that time, I had foresters. We had a program that worked with communities. And I actually was able to go to Asheville for a conference where I got to speak about our work. So I know what a cool place you guys are living in, and that there's a lot of things going on, hence, being called the cradle of forestry. But enough about me. Just to kind of give you guys another idea of the main points of what I'm going to talk about today is we're going to simply go back to what exactly is urban forestry, what are some of the hot topics today in urban forestry, who is Planet Geo, and what do we stand for, how do we provide solutions, and figuring out why do you really need a management plan, and what do we do next to make that happen.
Hey, Rachel, I'll just read off some of the tree species. And we have American beech, tulip tree, white oak, madrona, twisted willow, and then I put in Kentucky coffee tree. So.
Oh, I've not heard of a couple of those. That's really cool. I suppose you can grow a lot more there. So cool. Thanks, Chris.
Sure.
All right. So to go back to a super fundamental level, talking about what is urban forestry, and a lot of you sound like you're very seasoned professionals. You've been in this field for a while, but just really going back to the fact that it's all the woody biomass that we have in urban areas, in communities, areas where people live. So these are trees in our yards, our street trees, our park trees, importantly, trees that are in utility corridors, close to our watersheds, and just all of the different associated vegetation and soil that brings this whole system together with woody biomass. And something else before I move on that I think is really important to mention is that the urban forests that we see today, like 90% of those were man-made or designed by us. They weren't just here. And so that's why we always want to make sure people realize just how important it is that we intervene to help take care of it as well, even after it's been established, and how we can design to make it even better for the future. And so just some brief history that I wanted to look back on that I think is really important, because urban forestry as a field is extremely new. It was actually in the early 1900s that foresters and arborists, really started focusing on urban forest management, even natural forest management. And it wasn't until the 1970s that we really saw urban forestry, designated as, another form of discipline for forestry, having it be specifically urban trees. And then finally in 1971, we saw some legislation working towards, making it more of a priority and working to get more funding towards this field. And that came from an act from a congressman in Florida. And then in 1978, they made it so that the Secretary of Agriculture could actually allocate funds at a federal level to the states for, urban forestry funding. And it was in 1990, or it might have even been 1991, that we really saw a bigger emphasis on urban and community forestry as a whole, and getting funding to our states for designated programs. And so as we move forward, looking to today and all the things that we're focusing on in urban forestry, I have a huge list here, but just some of the big ticket items that we've really been seeing is, a focus on environmental justice, really being able to have people from all different backgrounds come to the table to talk about regulations, policies, environmental laws that, of course, relate to trees. And tree equity. How are we getting people to see trees as more than, just a plant, something that has value and gives us, dollar amounts of benefits. And I feel like that kind of rolls into green infrastructure, trees as an asset, but of course, sustainability. I know, having been to Asheville, you guys really seem like a green area that is very focused on sustainability. And that's something that we talk about in our management plans about, how can we really improve the things that you guys are already doing to become more sustainable. And then, of course, at least since I've been in urban forestry for like 6 years, I've seen a huge increase in research. A lot of that, of course, has to do with actual trees, but also with human health impacts, which has been really cool. I'm sure a lot of you, or if you haven't heard of Dr. Kathy Wolf, I believe she's at University of Washington. She has some really cool social research about people and trees and those factors, which is really neat to see. And of course, climate change, that's something that we all hear about with this topic. So I won't beat on that one too much, but especially with species diversity, this is something that with our plans, we work with communities to look at what are they planting, what do they have, and what can we come up with to make it so that in the future you don't have as many issues with invasive pests, monocultures, all of those wonderful things, because we seem to do it all over the country. And then, of course, here at Planet Geo, the use of technology to make greener cities. And so, again, before I jump into anything too deep, I think it's really important that you guys understand who we are at Planet Geo. Before I started working here, I actually had tree plotter for the state of South Dakota. And so it was working with Planet Geo that I really saw what a great company we are. And now that I'm working here, I've really gotten a peek inside of how the core values we have are brought to life. And so, not to get too mushy on anything, but I do think it's important that for us, our core values come back to being knowledgeable, passionate, helping first, innovating, and the theme of reaction wood. So, we're resilient, and just like a tree will heal itself, we find problems to your solutions and just continue to strive to be better. And then you guys can read, so I won't read the vision and mission directly, but we really are trying to make alliances with groups like you to make the world a greener place and a place that values trees more than ever. Okay, let's see here. And at Planet Geo, just like to kind of give you an idea of what we offer. So of course we have a tree inventory team that will come in and actually do the inventory for you in our tree plotter app, which I'm assuming a lot of you have seen. If you haven't, we'll have to check that out sometime. But we also do tree canopy assessments, web mapping applications, really customizable to what you want and need. And then, of course, talking about today with urban forestry consulting. So I think it's really important to note that we're very personal with our consulting services and your management plans. We really take the time to hear exactly what you want, what you need, and how exactly we'll help you step by step to put a plan together. And one last thing on us at Planet Geo, just talking about the apps, our products that we offer. Jobs is really more for private small tree care companies who need a work order management. It is map-based. Canopy, of course, is for canopy assessments. Inventory is, of course, what we use for our inventories that we do for cities across the country. And then parks is essentially inventory, but with added capabilities that are associated with parks, you know, playground, benches, trails, things like that, that you can incorporate it in to be more focused on parks. And so just to kind of give you an idea of the different plans that we do, I laid out these 3 items, but also do note that we will do, you know, for example, in the past, we've done ordinance reviews. We'll do tree species lists. We can start with smaller components and work our way up. But like the 3 main levels we're looking at is when we do a maintenance plan, we're really looking at the trees and exactly how we're going to prioritize your tree work. So that really comes down to us splitting up that work into years, giving you an estimated budget, and really defining the trees that need to be taken care of the quickest. That's, you know, really plain and simple. That's what your maintenance plan is for. When we look at a management plan, we're really looking at your operations as a whole. And so we're taking not only your inventory, but also your policy, how you're working with your community, potentially a canopy goal, and bringing all of those items together to really create a long-term vision there, and just diving a little bit deeper into the overall picture. And when we look at a master plan, for us, that's really the most comprehensive. So we're looking at high-level strategies, long-term policies, you know, broader goals, and even bringing more strategies together for public and private trees together. And so we do plans of all levels, and it kind of just depends on exactly what you guys are looking for. And so again, just to reiterate the fact that for us, our approach is that we want your plan to be a long-term vision that doesn't just sit on a shelf. We want something that you're actually going to use, and that really gets down to the nitty-gritty of your maintenance and management needs, giving you a real picture of the budget, you know, a work plan, timelines, and even just dollar amounts for the benefits that your trees are providing. It's more than just how many trees do we need to plant to meet a canopy goal. And so just to go into a little bit more detail about our approach and exactly what we do when we're working with a management plan is we'll first start with a research deep dive. And so what that means is before we even really have a chance to work with a community, we take the time to go in and find everything we can on the website or other resources that are open to us. So whether that's, you know, looking at tree inventory information, policies, different comprehensive plans that the city has, really looking at all of these items that we can gather information from to really make sure that the plan we're going to put together meshes well with other things that are going on in the city. And then, of course, when we want to talk to people who work with the actual city to hear about their feedback on how are things working together, how are departments working together, what are budgets looking like, you know, what do the people on the inside want to see from the plan. So we always find that to be extremely important. And then with our existing conditions, that's really looking at, you know, I would almost combine that with benchmarking. we're really looking at exactly like, what are your budgets looking like? What is your maintenance schedule looking like? And how are those factors comparing to other cities around you of, similar population, distance, how are you measuring up? And we find that doing that work often, it provides a better case to the people higher up to show them like, hey, we really should be at the same level as these other communities. Like, we need more funding or we need more resources. Makes it into kind of a fun competition for them, you hope. And then with community engagement, that often comes down to surveys that we'll send out to the community. Also, with some of our projects, we will design plan websites so that people can follow along with the plan, see the progress, take online surveys, and really have it be more interactive. So that's been really neat to see, as well as we've moved forward with those types of projects. And then, of course, with our urban forest audit, that comes from, it's like over 100 categories of things that we go through with all of your information to look at different components of like, what kind of policies do you have? Are you following certain ANSI standards? Just all of these very small details to see like potentially where there are gaps and where we can provide, better recommendations. And of course, I probably should have started with this, but our approach on a very simple level, taking all of that on the left, putting it into the chart on the right, we're looking at what you have, what you want, how we're going to get what we want, and then really have an idea at the end of how are we doing and how are we going to implement. And so right now, what I'm going to do is pass it on to Chris to talk about a past project that we've done in North Carolina that he was up close and personal with.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. So just wanted to highlight one project example. In the past 8 years, I've supported or worked with communities for 33 management plans. And the one here with Wake Forest, we just wanted to look at a more localized example of applying those planning elements that Rachel discussed. From the research deep dive, staff interviews, data analysis, on through to the engagement and auditing process. And so we were given a task to update their 2010 urban forest management plan. And we worked closely with the city forester there at the time. And we split up the role. So we weren't the consultant doing the entire management plan. It was a collaborative effort with the city doing certain portions of the plan and us taking on more of the data analysis, the strategy development, and providing a third-party review of programs and workflows. And that was a unique project. We don't oftentimes do it in that way, but sometimes the city may not have a large budget for these types of planning projects, and they will commit time on their own to support the development or update to a management plan. And so this slide just expands on the 2010 urban forestry vision for Wake Forest, and then it highlights some of the data sets that we utilized for developing the plan. We had the top-down look at canopy cover. We had the ground-up approach looking at public trees. And then we looked at the operations and best practices that the city currently applies. And then from that, I believe on the next slide, Rachel, we start to look at some analyses and summaries of the public tree population to inform strategies. So when you look at those three different types of plans that Rachel discussed, you have the maintenance, the management, and the master plan. This was more of a management plan where we do provide the guidance for priority maintenance, removals, routine tree pruning, as well as planting. But it more so looks at addressing canopy goals citywide and on the local level too, by neighborhood, and what the future benefits of planting trees would look like. So forecasting, reduced stormwater volumes, improved air quality by removing pounds of pollutants, carbon services such as sequestration and storage. So all of that comes into play to help the city communicate their efforts, because our strategies will look at current funding, but also what should the long-term vision of the urban forest be, and what funding strategies should be implemented to achieve those bigger goals. So this is one example of a project. Each city's different. You may be at a different starting point and may have less or more data to support the development of a plan. And the plan, during our planning process, will uncover those needs or provide strategies to strengthen what is already in place. That's done through those planning elements that Rachel described. And so that's just a high-level overview of the project. We can talk more specific to Wake Forest, but wanted to just give a local example in terms of context and some of the outputs. So go ahead, Rachel.
All right, thanks, Chris. So again, just to reiterate some of the reasons of why you guys need an urban forestry management plan. So what I'm going to do is outline some of the main things that we've really noticed as reoccurring themes that are, buzzwords, but also things that, we really believe in and that we think need to take shape in a lot of cities that aren't addressing these items. So again, I won't read all of these out loud to you, but of course, we're looking, of course, to clean the air and breathe easier. We find with a lot of the larger cities, the areas that we do see a lot of trees have healthier people, but also less crime, and are just more livable. I think that's something really important when I even think about, where I live. A lot of the nicer neighborhoods have more mature trees. And so again, it just comes down to creating a city that is more livable for the people that live there, but also protecting wildlife, and of course, positively influencing your sustainability there in Asheville. And, I think, of course, we talk about the good things that come from urban forests, but we also have to understand that there's risks, and that's why we have to plan. Most notably with pests and diseases, that's probably one of the top things that we see, with infestations that come from, your guys' side of the country. There's just that we're always dealing with something. So we just have to get to that point where we're planning so that this can have, the least amount of effect as possible. Storms and disasters are becoming, really a major issue all over the country. And so we've even worked with some communities on storm preparedness plans. And so there are ways that, we can't stop Mother Nature from doing what she does, but we can have a plan in place to know, who do we talk to? What do we need to do? What are the steps? Like, how can we handle this the most efficiently to get things back to, I suppose, what we would call normal. But then there's some other items on there. Let you guys kind of read those and we'll keep moving forward. And so something that I always like to share with people is that it really comes down to the partnerships you make when you're trying to pull a plan like this together and getting the resources together, working with partners to make sure that you are getting real feedback and that you're really addressing a wide amount of issues to work with a lot of different groups. And so, at the city level, you guys already have that advantage of being really close to city council, or at least we hope so, right? And within the community, I'm sure you guys have organizations and foundations that are focused on trees. I'm assuming in your area, it just seems like that kind of place. So, we really encourage those partnerships. And as we're going through our management plans, we, of course, like to get feedback from those groups, whether that's through a survey or through a draft review. We find that helps with long-term success more than anything, is helping everybody to feel included. And then, of course, something to think about is your utilities and how you're working potentially maybe with other departments in the city that you might, some people might not think are related to trees. But when we look at like planning and zoning and streets departments and public works, engineering, we have a lot of these different groups that are dealing with other issues that do relate to trees. And so we find that these plans can help with those work processes, but also maybe even distribute some responsibility a little bit more, which is really helpful to you guys. And then one of the other gals on our team, she used to work extremely close with city council. And this is really her major advice when we're working with elected officials. And I just wanted to run through these items because I think they're key. And so when you're going to work with these officials, especially if you're trying to get this plan to come to fruition, get things rolling with this project, to really let them know exactly what your goals are with the plan, but also why it's important and why it should be important to them. And then, of course, engage with those around you to see, how can you connect your purpose with those other groups around you and see what they're concerned with and see if there's anything within your ideas that's maybe missing to see like how we can improve that. And then, of course, ask. We have to be prepared to give them a clear request. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when somebody comes to ask me to do something or to help with something, you really have that expectation of knowing like exactly what that person wants from you. I think that helps with a lot of conflicts, really opens communication a lot more, just keeps things moving better. And so, again, just some other general advice for initiating your planning process is really knowing your timing, knowing when you're going to have some grant funding opportunities, what your budget cycles are, and really knowing that this is not a one-person show. It's really exciting to see the attendance that you guys have here today. Everybody seems to be extremely into it, which is great. And then again, just having those partners you can rely on down the road. And of course, when you're getting ready for this, we love to have updated records, really know your policies, and have numbers for your budgets. But you know what? We work with communities all the time that are like, we don't track that. Oh my gosh, what? And so just know that as we work through these items, we're going to be there with you step by step and really lay things out clearly. So where you're going to know exactly what we want from you and the direction that we're going. And so we actually just came out with this new ebook to create a resource for you guys to learn a little bit more detailed information for getting into having a management plan. And we called it, of course, So You Think You're Ready for a Management Plan. And I put the link in here, so when I share the slides with you guys, you'll be able to do that. It's really nice. It's very concise, but has a lot of really good information in there. So a lot of the things we talk about you'll find in there, but you'll find more in there that I didn't get a chance to cover today. And then one other new fun little tool we came out with is our Urban Forestry Scorecard. So this is like a little quiz that you can go on and take, and it'll kind of tell you what level your program is at and where, maybe we should meet and talk here at Planet Geo. And if you pull your camera out on your phone and hold the camera up to that, it should bring up a link when you have your camera focused on that box, and it will take you to a link right there, the scorecard. So again, at the end though, I'll have a link for this as well. If you're not into QR codes, I totally understand that. So hopefully you'll be able to check that out. And at this point, I have talked so much. So really, I'm just going to open the floor up for you guys to ask questions and get some more direction on what you want.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. I shared the links in the chat room, and we will have this as a resource. It's also in the meeting packet, it looks like, our presentation, so that URL should be accessible. And I think that's a great way to start off exploring a management or master plan for a city, is just gauging what you currently have, who are the key players, what's the timeline, what phases of implementation are you looking at, and who's going to monitor the plan for the long haul to make sure that it is a success. A lot of questions, and so those tools there that you shared can help get a feel for where you're at currently, and what maybe some housekeeping to do in order to prepare for a planning project like that. And yeah, one of the things, whether this goes out to bid or it's done in-house, the management plan or master plan, or it's a combination, the one thing you really want to have is just a clear outline of the objectives, what you're looking for in terms of the scope of work. And oftentimes consultants will provide their recommendation, but you want to make sure that you assemble a team like you have here to come upon agreed objectives. These are the outcomes that we want for our urban forest and for the master plan. So, some of those may be how to apply the 2018 urban tree canopy assessment you had done. What are the implications of the UDO revision that was also done in the city? And also, where are there gaps? Do we need a comprehensive public tree inventory? Should we do that before doing a master plan? Lots of things to figure out. Planet Geo is here as a sounding board. If you have thoughts or want to see what's done in other cities, we're here as a resource. Before getting into any planning work, we want to help you scope a successful scope of work and project. So Rachel, thanks for giving an overview of the purpose of urban forest planning, the background, and getting into some of our planning approaches where we use the fundamentals of adaptive management. And I'm not sure of the structure for the meeting, but we're here for any questions or comments, unless we want to turn over to the next agenda item with Dr. Ray Yeager.
Thank you so much. We have a few moments for questions. I don't know, Rachel, if you want to turn off the sharing, that way we can see everybody.
Sure.
And have a chat. So if any commission members or staff members have any questions, we can take those now. Let's see. Go ahead, Dawn.
Thank you for that great presentation. I have a couple of questions. One is one that's come up a couple times in our discussions is how often should a canopy study like the one we did in 2018 be done? Like how frequently?
Yeah, so part of that answer is how accurate is the assessment you're doing. So if you don't have an accurate assessment, doing a 5-year follow-up, you're not going to have a good baseline for comparison. I believe the 2018 assessment that was done was very accurate in terms of the standards for these types of assessments. So with the way technology is now, you're able to see these newly planted trees captured in the canopy assessment. So 5 years is recommended. 10 years is oftentimes what can be budgeted, but technology is improving in that there's subscription as a service now where you can get annual updates on your canopy cover change. And that's done through AI, artificial intelligence, where the QA, QC process is done by AI for a 94 to 96% accuracy. So it comes down to comparing apples to apples and how accurate your assessment is. But I'd say a safe answer is like a 5-year update.
Okay, thank you. And it's just like, I have two more quick questions. One is, when you do like a comprehensive tree inventory, do you also, or have you ever done an inventory of other types of infrastructure in the city that might interact with trees, like such as utilities or stormwater?
Right. Yeah, we've done a little bit of like detention basins and some green infrastructure mapping, but not to the extent of trees and planting spaces. When we talk about trees, we also oftentimes inventory hardscape conflicts and what that conflict is. Is it damaged sidewalks from roots, or the trunk of the tree impeding sidewalks, or conflicts with utilities? We note existing above ground utilities that are at the existing tree, or known underground ones, but that's about as far as we've gone with inventorying other assets.
Okay, great. And then lastly, in the community engagement process, like the one that you did with Wake Forest, how do you ensure that there's the inclusion of a diverse perspectives and diverse voices?
Right. So whether you put together a scope of work for the development of this plan or you do it in-house, you want to make sure that those who are responding to the project have an approach where they look to identify a local community partner. They have close connections or communications with the city's communications office, so you know what existing processes, messaging, events are in place. And then we oftentimes put together an internal community outreach plan. So this states the partners, the timing, the mechanisms, the partners, the community's address, that sort of thing. And having those local partners is really the best way, those neighborhood associations, the best way to get to the local level of diverse populations. We look at applying project websites, social media, live Q&As at a noon session and an evening session because, everyone's schedules are different. When they're in person, we look at transportation requirements. Is there public transportation to the meeting venue? What's the timing, parking options, and then ADA accessibility from the color palette chosen for materials to the other requirements or suggestions that ADA recommends. Just a lot involved with it. I will note that most of our planning projects, about 33% of the budget goes to community engagement. So that gives you an idea of just on general what it ends up being about a third of the budget.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon, go ahead.
Thank you for the great presentation. So I only have one question, and for me, having worked with this city for a little while, it's cost. How to get your information to translate into cost benefit for what we need, and how much can be done in-house and how much needs to be contracted out. Let's just say, I think you've got a great organization. I noticed that you have iTree benefits, and then with Wake Forest, you have the financial value using iTree, and iTree being a service by the Forestry. Do you use a lot of information like that say can be passed on to people like us that will be involved in subcommittees where we can wade through iTrees and get the information that we need and therefore defer the costs if we were to hire someone like you and say, okay, you guys do this research in iTrees, this is what we found you're going to need, and because we don't have certain expertise that you have, then you say, well, we can offer this to you, because I'm looking at it to how do we get a benefit like what you offer and then do what we need to do to offset the cost of this so that we just don't dump everything on an organization. And I do know from having used iTrees for myself that, and I haven't used it in about 2 years, frankly, that are you still using it? And when you say financial value, you're saying cost offset for heating and cooling and that type of thing? Is that?
Right. Yep. So when we have an inventory of trees, of public trees, we apply that data to iTree so we get those ecosystem services and benefits. That's your air quality, water quality, stormwater reduction, energy savings. We also take a look at the canopy data as well, the top-down look, which we would have to look at the 2018 assessment, but oftentimes that provides public and private urban forestry benefits and services, similar to what the public trees ecosystem services analysis provide. So that's 2 different data sets to utilize. And if we have an inventory with Tree Plotter, it automatically calculates those iTree benefits for public trees on an individual tree and as a total population. So then when we go into our planning efforts, let's say we do a kickoff meeting and we already have the inventory. A lot of times that's our starting message, the benefits of trees, and we provide the analyses and summary data to the city and its partners so that they can also create their own messaging. And throughout the process, oftentimes we're working with local community organizations and not telling them what to do, but suggesting, hey, this is some messaging that you can take to city council. This city is the lowest tree canopy of 10 other cities that we examined. We'll just give you sound bites and data to work with, and then you use as you see best fit. But we provide some suggestions to that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We just have time for one more question. So Ed?
Yeah, thank you, Amy. And thanks for the presentation. I really appreciate it. My question relates to the flexibility of your product. And I recognize that, management planning, maintenance planning, master planning is all based on some template that you roll out to cities. And my question is, how flexible are you within those templates? There's a few of us on this commission that are keenly interested in using a format that was introduced by Jim Clark literally decades ago, but it still seems to work. It's a sustainability model.
Sure.
It's based on community framework, vegetation resource, and management framework with performance standards and criteria indicators. And that model really works well. I think and a couple of good examples. The city of Toronto, the city of Tampa Bay use it, and it helps them manage the resource in terms of emerging issues like invasive insects or resilience to climate change and things like that. So the question is, how adaptable are your products to building them around that type of management framework? And then to underscore Dawn's question, the ability to identify other infrastructure as it relates to trees is critical in our ability to leverage funds. If we can go to the capital programs folks and say, okay, we have an idea on what some of your sidewalk issues are in terms of ADA compliance, or sort of end running some utility tree conflicts before they get ugly, I think it's to everybody's advantage. So it's really a proactive way to plan.
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned the model of urban forest sustainability by James Clark. And I oftentimes start off with a quote from that study where it talks about urban trees and forests are integral to the sustainability of cities, but they're not born, they're made, and it requires a community-wide commitment to their creation and management. So that is where the fundamentals of urban forest management for Planet Geo. We apply that framework of the vegetation resource, the resource management, and the community framework. Sometimes you'll see that specifically laid out as sections in a plan. There are 4 plans I'm working on right now that have that laid out. I think we call them urban forest analysis, and then resource management and community framework. And that, I think, has been revisited and updated since 1997 with the criteria and indicators by Andrew Kenny and Philip Van Wassner. So we apply the CNIs, the criteria and indicators, which really helps us to tailor a project to the city. It's not just a general, do all best practices and achieve a canopy goal and you're good. It looks at all these different criteria, where the city's at currently, and what are those indicators and measures of progress. And so we do those studies to develop a plan. And then the last part, which is kind of a blend of the model of urban forest sustainability and the CNIs, is the Forest Service's Urban Forest Management and Sustainability Audit System. So that was developed in 2014, I believe. And what we did was just revamp and update some of the categories. But in short, there are 11 categories to that audit and 130 elements. And based on our research, staff meetings, community engagement, benchmarking, we score 130 elements from a 0 to 3 scale, not practice to exceeds common practice. And all of those elements align with the model of urban forest sustainability. So that's a long answer to say we adjust our approach based on what cities prefer to see in a management plan. And we've adapted our planning approach over time to make sure we integrate those components.
Right. Just so you know, I was one of the co-authors of that audit system along with Dudley Hartle with the Forest Service. And Asheville did do a sustainability audit. We called it a gap analysis, just so the name would be a little less intimidating. But we did conduct that about, I don't know, gang, how long ago was that? Maybe 5 years ago now?
I think it was 2017.
I'm sorry?
2017, I believe.
17, okay. And one of our key findings was that we need to move forward to develop a comprehensive urban forest master plan, which is why we're having that discussion today. So.
Right. Yeah, I'm familiar with that project that went out for bid and followed along on the status of the gap analysis. I think that's a great way to set the stage for planning efforts. We're doing that in British Columbia and out in Washington, just doing an audit or a gap analysis and then going to the next step of planning. So I was glad to see that Asheville did that.
Thank you. Tell Ian I said hey.
Yep, will do. Yep, thanks, Ed.
All right. So for the sake of time, we'll have to wrap up this particular presentation, but thank you so much. And these folks from Planet Geo have been very gracious in offering their time and assistance if we have further questions. So you can funnel those through me or directly with their contact information. So thank you once again. It was really great. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, and contact us if you have questions or further comments. And we're going to sign off at this point, and just want to again say thank you for the invitation. It was great to meet all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so
All
much,
right,
you guys.
enjoy your meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we have had a few people join us. So I'd like to just kind of introduce our new logins. So Kim Roney, do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself?
I'm in the library, but I'm listening.
Okay. Kim is our city council liaison. Obviously can't talk loud in the library, but thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
Also,
the presentation.
thank you. Two more commission members. So Cecil.
Hey, sorry I'm a little late. I hope y'all are paying attention to what's going on in council regarding cutting back on commissions and boards. I think we need to be really attentive to that.
Thank you. We'll be talking about that later. And Perrin.
Hello, everybody. I just got out of a work meeting I couldn't get around, so I'm glad to be able to catch up with you. Sorry I missed the presentation.
Okay, thank you. It is recorded, so y'all can catch up. And so our next presentation is Dr. Ray Yeager with the Green Heart Study, Louisville. And I invited Dr. Yeager because I saw his presentation at the North Carolina Urban Forest Council meeting last September, and he was kind enough to join us today and talk about the Green Heart Study. So sorry you missed the rest of our introductions. We have our Urban Forestry Commission members here and some city staff members with us today. So I don't know if you want to go ahead and run your presentation, introduce yourself. The floor is yours.
Okay, great. And thank you, Amy, very much for the invitation to speak here today. So as I share my slides here, just a quick introduction to myself. I'm Ray Yeager. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Epidemiology and Population Health at the School of Public Health at the University of Louisville, and also a member of our Christina Lee Brown Environment Institute. So, I don't know how much of a briefing you all have had on my talk today. So you might be wondering, what is a professor of epidemiology doing at your all's forestry retreat? Well, a little bit more background. I'm a health geographer, so I specialize in looking at links between place and health. So I got into the field largely looking at the distribution of air pollutants and cardiovascular disease outcomes. That's what I worked on for several years. And to do that, we have to assess many different parts of our environment to determine, what determinants of cardiovascular disease are actually coming from air pollution versus various other sources. So about 7-8 years back now, we were looking at associations between roadway pollutants and cardiovascular disease markers. And we started looking at other factors of the environment to determine, is it roadways, is it not roadways, is it something else? And just sort of as an aside, we put greenness based on the NDVI, basically a satellite measure of how much vegetation there is in a place. We put that in our statistical models, and we kind of stumbled upon some really strong associations between greenness and cardiovascular health. And we were kind of wondering, what's going on here? Why is this? We looked at this in many different ways and began finding a lot of different associations. So that kind of led to the central hypothesis of our Green Heart study, that exposure to neighborhood greenery diminishes the risk of cardiovascular disease by decreasing levels of air pollution. And we're focused largely on air pollution because we've done past studies looking at associations between how much greenness that there is in a place and how much air pollution people are exposed to. So this is one of the studies we did. What you can see here is the outline of Jefferson County, Kentucky, otherwise known as Louisville. And what you see on the left are basically different markers of volatile organic compounds, a type of harmful air pollutant, and how much
Sorry,
of it
Dr. Yeager, I'm going to
Yeah.
pause you for a sec. Your slides don't seem to be advancing, so we're still on
Okay.
the first slide.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, because we can't see the.
Yeah, let me see if I can reshare this, and hopefully that will take care of the issue. Okay. Is this any better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Can you see my slides advancing right now?
Yes, we did. All right, so yeah, perfect. There we're on the map.
Okay. What you now see on the right is an outline of Jefferson County, Kentucky, along with NDVI, that measure of greenness, and an approximation of location of our study participants. On the left, markers of volatile organic compound exposure. So we found these associations leading us to believe that there's something there with greenness and exposure to air pollutants. We also found that relationship was spatially dependent. So basically based on the placement of the trees, how far away, that they can have different influences on how much pollution is being reduced and what pollutants in particular. So we looked at these associations and we kind of broke it down by different groups as well, and found that some groups were more susceptible than others. Why that is, we're still exploring. And then we also looked at markers of cardiovascular disease and stress. So here we found epinephrine, a marker of stress and sympathetic activation, was lower in higher greenness areas. And we found that markers of cardiovascular disease itself were sometimes lower in higher greenness areas. And all of this work kind of led us to sort of this framework that basically more greenness, largely trees, as you all well know, do a lot of very good things for the environment, between light pollution, air pollution, noise pollution, walkability, and then direct effects on stress, but then also secondary effects on physical activity, and sleep, social cohesion, and all of those things come together to influence numerous risk factors of cardiovascular disease and things that basically affect how likely you are to have things like a heart attack or a stroke. So that kind of leads us to, well, now that we've done all this work and we have our main hypothesis, what are we going to do? Well, we picked a study area to conduct our study. And we picked this area because it's an area that has a lot of pollution. There's a lot of major roadways, there's industry in the area. It's also low greenness, and it's a high population density too, so we can enroll a lot of study participants in a relatively small area. And then here's kind of the basic outline of our study, what we're doing when. The arrow on the bottom is our post-COVID plans. So the overall idea of what we're doing is we're going into this study area. We're enrolling a whole bunch of participants. So at baseline, we enrolled 730 study participants, and we did basically a baseline assessment of their cardiovascular health and their pollution exposure. Then we're going to plant a whole bunch of trees, and we're going to come back after those trees are planted and see basically how much all of these markers have changed And to determine if it's actually the trees that caused the change or not, we are basically planting half of the study area and not the other half, so that we can compare the planted versus unplanted groups. In that way, it's kind of like a drug trial where you give half the people a drug and half the people you don't, and you compare the two. So to assess the change that we're making, we're doing a very detailed environmental assessment of not just how many trees there are, not just NDVI, but the volume of canopy, the total leaf area, the biomass of this area, and determining how much we are changing all of that through our planting. And then we're also assessing pollutant exposure through numerous different monitoring sites and mobile monitoring of pollution in the area. And from the participants that we're enrolling, we're collecting a lot of different samples to measure many different forms of cardiovascular disease risk, whether that's something we call biomarkers, basically markers we can measure in blood, or more traditional things like blood pressure. So this is just sort of a more technical slide. In addition to all those cardiovascular biomarkers, we can measure pollutant exposure directly from our study participants. So to do that, basically when you're exposed to volatile organic compounds, your body, they get in, they do damage, and then your body's able to process them eventually. And you excrete basically the breakdown products of that through your urine. So we can measure urine samples that we collect from study participants to determine how much volatile organic compounds people are exposed to. So to do all of this, we have to transplant large trees because our study timeline based on our funding is only for 5 years. So we have to enroll, first we have to do a lot of community engagement. Then we have to enroll a whole lot of study participants in a small amount of time. We have to change the area's greenness by a whole lot in a relatively small amount of time, and then re-enroll all of the participants, do our analysis, and try to publish papers in the span of 5 years. So to basically cause a quick shift, we're transplanting the largest trees we possibly can within budget. And to do that, we've done a lot of community engagement. We've been to, more community meetings than we can count. We're, in contact with the local politicians. We have an advisory board from the community. We've done numerous outreach events, which has been critical to all of the work that we're doing. So far, this slide is a little bit outdated, but I think so far we're about 4,500 trees planted of our total goal of 9,000 trees. So we still have our planting period through the spring to finish up all of that planting. We have a lot of trees already ordered, on their way, and ready to go in the ground now. And as soon as I think it warms up just a little bit more, we're going to go ahead and start plopping those trees back in the ground, and which I know is your all's expertise, and really start making that meaningful change in the canopy before we start re-enrollment of our study participants. So just a few photos to kind of show you all what this looks like. What you see on the bottom part of this photo is the Interstate 264 that basically rings around central Louisville. It carries about 80,000 vehicles per day. So as one of the major sources of pollution in this neighborhood, we're planting green buffers around this roadway and several other roadways to hopefully filter out and block the pollutants before they ever reach residential areas. So this is a photo kind of mid-planting. We're ending up with several rows of tree planting between the roadway and the neighborhood. So it's quite an undertaking for sure to get all these large trees in the ground in a short span of time. And I will go ahead and use this time to acknowledge the Nature Conservancy for funding a lot of this planting that we're doing. The Nature Conservancy basically told us, like, hey, this study is a great idea, and if you all can get it funded by the National Institutes of Health to conduct an actual funded peer-reviewed clinical trial basically of trees, then we can help you fund that vegetated intervention. So then we went to the National Institutes of Health, said, hey, here's what we're trying to do. And they said, well, we don't fund trees, but as long as you have someone that can do this, we would be willing to fund the study because we agree this is an interesting idea and it's worth doing. So eventually, after a few rounds of peer review, we got the funding accepted from NIH for what is officially a clinical trial of how trees can affect health in a neighborhood. So a few more plantings. This is what things look like before the planting along this. This is a sound wall to the left, and this is what they look like after. The huge tree in the back, we didn't plant. That one was already there. But the rest of the buffer, we did. You can kind of see the sound wall peeking through behind that. And we're hoping in about a year's time, all that's going to fill in really well to make the buffer much more effective. So one of the things that we're doing in the meantime, before we've re-enrolled all of our study participants and we can see how much of a change all of this planting is made, is doing what's called cross-sectional studies, which is just a single point in time looking in our neighborhood, how much areas of high greenness differ from areas of low greenness based on the 730 participants that we originally enrolled. So I'm going to go ahead and go to this slide of preliminary results that we have. Don't take away too much from what you're seeing here with these results. They've barely been internally reviewed, much less peer reviewed. So I don't want you to go home and start making decisions based on this. I mostly want to show this as an example of where we're going with some of the analyses we're doing. So what you're seeing here are the associations, these statistically significant associations between NDVI and blood pressure in our study participants. So what you see in the top left cell of this table is basically how much less blood pressure is in areas that have a 0.1 higher NDVI. So it's a decent amount higher NDVI. At a yard level, you can imagine that maybe as one medium-sized tree as opposed to grass. So you see up at the top, we have front yards, backyards, all yards, parcels, and then 20 meter through 500 meter radii, and then a 5-minute walk time. So this is much higher resolution than previous studies, which is one of the great things that we can do in Greenheart because we have that really high resolution data. And one of the really interesting things that we're seeing so far is that among study participants, front yards are much more associated, greenness in front yards is much more associated with blood pressure than greenness in backyards. Very interestingly, if you go down, I don't know if you all can see my cursor, but you see these different smokers. By the way, these are different statistical models. I won't get into all that. But basically, if you go down to smokers, we're seeing really strong associations with greenness in the front yard of smokers and no associations with blood pressure in the front yard of non-smokers. Why this is, we're not really sure yet. This is something we want to explore more. But this is something that can kind of hint at ultimately the public health kind of actions that we want to inform with the work that we're doing. So what we suspect is that the greenness in front yards is better at reducing pollution exposure from roadways that go across, that are in front of those front yards, whereas greenness in backyards doesn't really reduce the pollution exposure inside the home all that much. And basically smokers are very, very, very susceptible to air pollution exposure because they're already getting that huge hit of air pollution from smoking on basically, an on and off basis. But then if they're exposed to air pollution on an ongoing basis, that makes the effect of smoking so much worse. Whereas you don't really see that with non-smokers. But then interestingly, if you skip over here to this 100 to roughly 300 meter radius, you don't really see those big associations anymore at larger radii among smokers. You do see them with non-smokers. So our hypothesis there is that maybe among non-smokers, it's different benefits of greenness that are leading to associations with blood pressure, maybe things more like exercise or mental health or social cohesion. Like I said, at this point, all of this is very, very preliminary. We still need to do a lot to get this finalized and then submitted. So then it's peer reviewed and then we can publish it. But once evidence like this is published, we're hoping that we can really inform decisions on organizations on where they plan, how best to improve health, hopefully open up health-based funding streams for people like you all. And show that, yes, we know that vegetation can improve health, and we know, here's the best way to do it. Here's, for this kind of situation, this is, really more effective for reducing blood pressure, but maybe this is better in these subpopulations. At this point, it's largely hypothetical, but we're hoping to take that, basically all these hypothetical notions, to being evidence-based with the study. So of course, a study like this couldn't be done without a huge amount of collaborators. We have numerous logos of funders up here, collaborating institutions. Washington University in St. Louis is doing a lot of the air monitoring. Murray State is looking at biodiversity. And then over on the left, we have Louisville Groves is planting a lot of trees along with some local contractors. Hyphy Design Laboratory is helping design a lot of the vegetated buffers and other plantings. And then we have various local institutions. And I always hate this slide because I know I'm always missing other organizations. I don't even bother putting the people up anymore. Because at this point with this study, if you include all of the planting volunteers, if you include all of the study participants, if you include all of the people that have helped enroll study participants, all of the scientists, all of the students that have worked on the study, several thousand individuals have worked on this study at this point in one form or another. But then, they largely fall into these major categories. We of course have to think for the study, the community itself, where we're doing this study, all of the participants, all the volunteers, the stakeholders, students, contractors, funders, and everybody else that has participated. It's quite a large endeavor and a lot of fun to be part of. And our hope is that we can really help and inform greening interventions to come and really lay the groundwork for not just thinking of greenness and tree canopy as something that's nice to have, but something that is essential to the health of communities. And, hopefully after we do this, we know exactly, in what ways greenness can reduce air pollution. We can basically create a better model for healthy urban living where tree canopy and informed interventions can be part of that. So thank you all for having me today. That was kind of the formal part. I went through it pretty quickly to leave plenty of time for questions and answers. And I will open up the floor.
Thank you. That was so awesome. As a scientist, I get very excited about evidence-based research. Is really exciting. So we do have just a few minutes for questions. So what questions do we have for Dr. Yeager? All right, go ahead, Perrin.
That was excellent, Dr. Yeager. Thanks so much for being here and sharing your findings with us. I feel like I've been looking for this study for years. It's wonderful to see it actually happening. So I understand that you have data, preliminary data that's sort of raw and unprocessed that you included in your presentation. It's not ready for showtime. That said, is there any version of your presentation that you could provide to us that maybe doesn't include stuff like that, or anything that you'd be comfortable sharing with us that we could take and keep and use as a resource?
Yeah, I'm happy to share all my slides with that one. You're welcome to use them. Let's see, the slide that had sort of the environmental and physiological mediators, so like greenness leads to these environmental changes, leads to these health changes. That's actually published in a review paper that we published. a couple years ago. So you should be, I can't remember the name of that off the top of my head. I can find it for you real quick though.
I just put in the chat the overall website for the Green Heart study, so you can link from there as well to
And
what's
I
available.
will apologize in advance. Our website isn't the best because there's so many different audiences, and as scientists, we aren't great at websites.
Well, just one quick follow up. I did get a question from a geography master's student here in Asheville who is asking me about doing a similar type of a project here in Asheville. And I'm just wondering if there's any resources that you would suggest that I connect her with, or can I give her your email to ask you questions? Or
Yeah, that's probably the best way to do it. Just kind of see where you're all at with this, and talk through some of the logistics, what the end goals are, that sort of thing. It's we're coming at this from a very, very different angle than I think people in the forestry world would, because we're cardiovascular scientists and epidemiologists. We're not foresters. Like I said, we stumbled onto this, and we're trying to, educate ourselves as much as we can. But I think, that's why I love going to meetings like your all's, meetings like the North Carolina Forestry Conference, where I can really learn from what you all are doing and have these sort of informal discussions on, well, where is this all going? How does what the research we're doing inform potential interventions in the future? So yeah, I'm happy to talk through that. And I found that link real second ago, so I'll see if I can put that in the chat.
Thanks.
Yep, and we have a few papers out already on greenness, but none nearly as extensive as Green Heart's going to be.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Ed?
Yeah, just a quick question, and thanks for your presentation. I'm wondering if I missed this in the beginning, but the pollutants that your study focused on, is it particulate matter, or did you include ground level ozone and some of the oxes and noxes that we typically get?
Yeah. So I'll go through the big ones. Particulate matter, PM 2.5, so kind of the medium-sized particulates. That stuff spreads through the environment really, really quickly, and the spatial extent to which you can functionally monitor PM 2.5 just isn't plausible for this, and really most other studies. PM 2.5 is typically studied at like the regional level. Even from one side of Louisville to the other, there's very few differences in PM 2.5. We are doing a very, very thorough assessment of ultrafine particulates. So if PM 2.5 is less than 2.5 microns, ultrafine is less than 0.1 microns in diameter. That definitely has a much more narrow spatial extent. And we can actually see that from our preliminary data with ultrafine particulates extending 100 to 300 meters away from roadways. We have very, very high resolution maps from our mobile monitoring for ultrafine particulates. We're measuring NOx at a less fine spatial scale for various reasons. You mentioned ozone. Ozone's really a tough one. Because ozone is something that kind of happens at the city and regional level, or at least large chunks of cities. And the thing here is volatile organics coming off of trees can actually reduce ozone because they're binding to those molecules in the atmosphere. They're reducing them on the lower spatial scale, but as they float away, as they react in the atmosphere, more VOCs coming from one place can increase ozone somewhere else, basically. And because this is a high VOC area, there's already a ton of traffic releasing a lot of VOCs in this area. There's actually going to be less ozone in this area in particular because of all of the VOCs. So even though there's less ozone, all those VOCs are way worse than just having more ozone. But then those VOCs float off in the atmosphere. They get hit by the sun. They start, doing this incredibly complex chemistry, and they turn into ozone on the other side of the city. So we're not really focused on ozone to kind of give you a medium length answer to that question. VOCs are notoriously hard to measure, but I mentioned that one method we have to measure what's called urinary metabolites of VOC exposure. So you breathe in VOCs, your body processes that. It basically binds other molecules onto those VOCs. You excrete those through urine, and we can measure the amount of the VOC exposure in urine and essentially use all of our 730 study participants as their own little air monitor.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
Great.
A lot of chemistry I don't understand personally.
Yeah, it just shows the complexity of really trying to understand the roles of vegetation and mitigating air quality issues.
Yeah, and that's something I really want to do in the future is, I don't have to explain to you all of the different benefits of trees, but trying to figure out which benefits are most impactful to cardiovascular health. Because if we know, there's a community that has these risk factors, then we might want to tailor a vegetated intervention to addressing those risk factors specifically. But now, all we have is associations between, more trees is better health. And we know there's 20 different ways trees can affect health, but we don't know which ones are most responsible for those ways. So we don't have a good way to maximize that yet.
Right. And then there's the issue, this is my last point because I know we have to move on, but the issue of the type of vegetation that's being employed. Because I noticed that you're using all evergreens along the freeway, and obviously they're much better scrubbers than a deciduous tree would be. Particularly in the winter.
Yeah, good catch on that. And that's something I didn't delve into, but we are using evergreens. They tend to have waxier surfaces than a lot of other trees, which is better at capturing pollutants. And then they largely maintain needles year round, or in some case magnolias, so leaves year round. So, you get more of a year round benefit. Some of those, we're trying to plant trees that are hardier also to like roadway environments. But yeah, we are focusing on evergreens.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
That actually made me think of a question. Do you know if there's any associated study with the vegetation itself? Like long term, is anyone looking at what's surviving? As far as, you're doing all this intervention, is anyone looking at the vegetation itself and how it might be impacted?
As of now, no, but if you know anybody that wants to, we should have records of all that.
We'll see. Maybe someone will take that on.
Yeah.
Because it would just be a shame to go through all of this, and then in 2 years, you've done your study, but then what happens to the vegetation? Is it still there and doing its work?
Yeah, definitely so. And we do, one of our planting contractors is under contract to maintain these for a few years after planting. So hopefully we don't end up with a high loss rate, but and our hope is to secure future funding to follow this intervention as it gets bigger and bigger. But
Trees Louisville might be interested in some of that, at least,
yeah.
Kind of coordinating someone to look at that. Or the university. Anyway, just ideas. All right, Sharon, go ahead.
Just which brings me to the question that Ed brought up is we have an issue with our buffer planting of too many trees because of attrition. And I noticed with your new plantings, everything's all nice and pruned and all planted 2-3 feet on center, and it's going to be 12 feet across. So you're going to have a lot of culling out eventually. And I'm assuming that is just for attrition sake as opposed to anything else, because you're very densely planted, which I think for your study you would need, but in the plant's health in the long run is just going to be, crammed up together is what I noticed.
Yeah, I think you're right on point there. Like I mentioned, we're planting large trees. We're also planting those large trees pretty densely, just because we just don't have the time to let them grow over a period of years
Right.
in the study. But we'll see how it goes. We might have to thin things out a little bit as things get, bigger and more dense.
A fabulous study. Thank you so much. That was fascinating. Thank you, Amy, for talking him to come in to talk to us.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Well, once again, thank you so much. I'm really happy that you were able to bring this information to our group, and we can hopefully use this as some tools to convince our stakeholders why vegetation is important and necessary.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you all very much. Hopefully in a year or so, we'll have a few of these studies published, and you can throw that down on their desk and say, here's why we need trees.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you all.
Thanks. Have a great day. All right. Well, yay. Hopefully we're all feeling energized with information now. So let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. Let's return at 2:30 and we'll move on. So thanks, Mark. We'll introduce you when we get back. 2:30.
I just sent you a laudatory email calling you a rock star.
Oh, there, I just got it.
Yeah, that was great. God, I love the fact you go to all those wherever you go to all the time. Yeah, that's just amazing.
I like to go to conferences, but I'm a sucker for this kind of stuff.
Cutting edge. It's been a while. Yeah, I need to go back and do more of that. There's so much going on.
I know it can feel overwhelming to keep up, but that's why I like to, get it from others.
Yeah, amazing, fascinating.
Good. I'm glad you liked it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So as everybody gets back, if you want to just come on camera so that we know that you're here. And real quick, Mark, I want to apologize. I think I might have told you the wrong time. I hope you can hang out a little longer. If not, let me know. But I have to let Nancy and Chris talk because they have to leave at 3.
Yeah, I thought I saw them ahead of me on the agenda anyway. So
I'm sorry. I was responding without checking, so I apologize.
oh, no problem.
Okay. All right. Okay, is everybody back? All right, so I think the only new person to join us is Mark, and he'll be talking to us just a minute. But Mark, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Mark Foster. I'm the city arborist based in the Public Works Department. I'm sure I've met every single one of you, but maybe not. There might be some strangers out there to me.
Well, we are broadcasting, so just in case our live audience, which is
right,
who knows who's out there. But all right, thank you so much. Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on. So next we're going to be talking to city departments and other partners. So we're just going to put this all together before we get into some of the nitty-gritty UFC planning stuff, so that we can let our city staff and others go if they need to. So first we have development services, and we're going to talk about the fee in lieu program, some of the metrics to monitor the tree canopy protection ordinance, tree plantings and removals, and the boards and commissions restructuring we'll talk about here briefly. We will get to Mark's role since he's in public works just down the line, but some of this will tie in together. But let's see, Chris, do you have some information on us on the fee in lieu program? Most of what, just for background, I asked Chris to kind of put together briefly some of the pieces that are accessible to us as far as data and metrics that we might be able to use to create a framework for the fee in lieu funds. So I guess, Chris, if you want to let us know what you have so far, and then we can see if there's questions.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So we are what? We're a good ways into the tree canopy protection program. We've collected some fees in lieu. We have some larger projects hanging out there that anticipate larger payments of fee in lieu, but they haven't happened yet. So we haven't gotten to that point. So as we've always said, kind of waiting to see how much money we get, how fast it comes, and during that process, figure out how we're going to spend it. And I know Amy and I have talked and gotten together before about some of the metrics and the GIS tools we can use to try and zero in on places that need canopy. Back when we brought this canopy amendment through, we also identified the fee and lieu component as a really strong possibility to be able to target equity when we do this. And there's different kinds of equity. We've got shade equity, income equity. We've got all sorts of layers and things we can use to target where trees can be planted. So what we've done, we do have an internal map that kind of assigns tree scores to city-owned parcels. 1 second. I'll talk and do this at the same time. so that we can look for land that we already own and already have the right to plant trees on to use that money. Because that's the easiest target. Right? We've gotten advice from our legal department that we can, in fact, acquire land for trees with that money. So that is definitely something that's fair game. Give me 1 second, I will pull this guy up. Make sure everything loads like it expected to. Okay, well, if that loads, I'll show my screen in a second. But right now, it's giving me a partial map, which is not going to help any of you at all. But what we've done is we've taken factors in, of course, city ownership, amount of tree canopy that's currently on the parcel, impervious surface on the parcel, because if we're looking at the parcel that's 100% impervious, it's more difficult to plant a tree on impervious surface. Whether or not there's floodplain present, whether or not there's structures present. You give a tree score to a property. So that's kind of a high level thing that we'd be able to look at and say, these lots that are darker green, and I'm just going to share some with this. It's close enough to fully loaded to actually be helpful now. These lots that are darker green might be something we want to take a closer look at for tree planting opportunities, basically. It's just that kind of tool. It's an initial guidance tool. Now the thought here, you can see that it's really tiny. We can start to add other data on here too. You can start to look at, by block census club block groups. We can start to look at income levels. We can start to target equitable distribution of those tree and wood funds as well. The caveat, I'm sure all of you remember, is that wherever we collect our tree fee and lieu funds, whatever resource management district we collect them in, it's also where we have to spend them. And I will tell you right now, every cent that we've collected, I was just double checking this, has been in the urban resource management district. So we haven't actually collected on anything to do downtown. There are a lot of downtown projects kind of in the works though, and a lot of those are electing, or appearing that they're going to elect requirements. So we'll probably see urban being moved before we see suburban a little bit. So we'll see those two districts funded first. And then we'll need to make an analysis and figure out where they should go. We talked the whole time when we were implementing this about how we could partner with a third party, perhaps Greenworks or somebody to help get trees in the ground to homeowners and things like that. It doesn't have to go on public property for a tree to be planted. Those are things that really need to be explored. We do have that budget request in for the urban forester. We see that position as somebody who would really take an active role in managing the ski and rural program as well, if we do end up with that position. So that's something that's good. That's kind of the state of where we are with the fee and lieu program right now. We're getting to a point where we've collected enough to start thinking about how to spend it, but only in one resource management district. Those are the tools we have right now. And we can always bring more. Plan as for this map to just be a web app that y'all can look at during your meetings or free time or whatever, and get thoughts together about that, about where these trees should go and where these funds should be used.
All right. So I think one of the main ideas here is that we have data that we can use to help inform these decisions so that it's not, at least avoiding the appearance and or reality of this being some sort of willy-nilly decision, you know what I mean, made by others, right? So we want to incorporate as many voices and as much information as we can into this decision-making process. Does anybody have any just high-level questions for Chris on that? What I'm imagining, and this is what we can actually talk about, I'm thinking what we'll need is perhaps like a task force, Urban Forestry Commission, city staff, other stakeholders, to create a more detailed framework, what that looks like exactly, whether it's like a question kind of framework, is the property, high risk based on some of our vulnerability metrics. Is the property, or is the project going to provide this or that benefit? So, or, it's a framework where we have certain amounts that we want to put into different buckets, so the final process is yet to be determined. That's why we're kind of here still talking about it. So I guess what I wanted to see is, how does everybody feel about perhaps this idea of more like a task force to really dig in and try to get some of those details ironed out? So Sharon, go ahead.
So we've got it broken down to fee and lieu, metrics, and monitored tree canopy protect, TPA, and the annual tree planting and removal. Would you break this down into like those 3 categories in a subcommittee, or would you just want to do a task force of fee and lieu and concentrate on what constitutes fee and lieu?
Yeah, right now we're just talking about fee and lieu.
Okay.
The metrics is what we get at our Urban Forestry Commission meetings. What are we monitoring with the program?
Well, and then again, I've got questions that I've been writing down to give whenever we get together, just ask, because I have specific questions to ask. So when I get those metrics heard, yes, that's a number, but I don't know how it's applicable to something. Okay. So for me, we've got a number of areas that are kind of ambiguous. So how do you want to bite off this elephant? You want to just chew up fee and lieu at first, and then take the metrics of what is the quantitative value of how many trees are actually coming out percentage to how many is actually going back in, and what's the difference in the fee and lieu cost, and are we losing canopy as opposed to gaining canopy? Are we getting money as opposed to, see what I'm saying?
Right. I think
So,
that's
yeah.
separate. Right now we're talking about specifically through the program, we've collected these funds, then what? So right now,
Yeah.
yes, we are talking
Okay.
about that specific piece. So
Yeah.
does that make sense? And then, yes, I agree that the monitoring, and that's, again, just what we'll talk about.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask. So I can see a task force, unfortunately, for all of this. So do we want to, because that's how I think, do we want to tackle in order of what's important to all of us collectively, or, or have X amount of people, because there's only so many of us, to tackle, how do you want to look at this as far as?
That's a good question. I guess what I'm envisioning is, specifically because this piece is dealing with the money, having it be a more inclusive task force that has like more than just the UFC. I think some of those other pieces might be better served, for now anyway, as a UFC like working group, because we have that expertise and we can dig into those metrics.
Mhm.
But because this is dealing with this bigger picture with funding and spending,
Mhm.
that's why I'd like to get sort of more seats at the table,
Mhm.
for that piece.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I can see that.
And again, it's just an idea. So
Mhm.
open to suggestions. So, all right. So yeah, we'll come back to the whole metrics and monitoring separately as the next piece. So I think Dawn.
Thank you. And I had 2 questions. One, well, first, I like the idea of a task force or some other smaller working group to address the fee and lieu funds and how they're dispersed and the criteria for that. I don't know if Greenworks should be part of that, since we could be the recipient of those funds. And the other thing is, when we first started talking about fee and lieu, it was not just about tree planting, but also about preservation and perhaps land acquisition to protect areas that have mature growth. And so I was wondering if that is still part of the conversation, because there are parcels of land that the city could acquire that have mature trees on it, which in some ways would be better than planting new trees.
Oh, absolutely. Personally, it's one of my highest priorities. And Chris kind of touched on that. You might have not heard him, but
Yeah.
yes, we do have legal go ahead. That land acquisition is a part of the program.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I was having trouble understanding. Some of my sound must be off, but thank you. Thank you.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Ed, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we have the cart before the horse here a little bit. So if we do anything, I would recommend that we establish sort of an interim process until we've completed a comprehensive urban forest master plan, which would better advise us on priorities for tree planting and everything else that we could use to dispense the fees in lieu. So between now and then, I would suggest that we establish a working group within the Urban Forest Commission. And the commission already has a very good track record of working with city staff and engaging the public through groups like the Tree Protection Task Force and et cetera. And until we get the plan, so we just make some decisions and make some baby steps based on what we perceive our priorities to be until we get the plan done. And then I second Dawn's thought about focusing some efforts on preserving existing trees, because there are some opportunities that exist today that we could jump on if we had the money. So that's all I have to say about that.
All right, sorry, apologies. I had to loop in Greg Schuler so we can get in here. All right, so let's see. And really good points. As we're even talking through this, I'm like, wait a sec, maybe this starts in the UFC and we get, more information gathered and sort of a preliminary framework before we expand. So yeah, even as we're talking, I'm kind of thinking that might be a better way to go. Cecil, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's worth considering around all this that we're now talking about yet another subsystem, another subgroup, which I applaud. I mean, we form these subgroups who can focus on particular issues. To me, that's really urgent. And yet, I think we got to remember we're fighting against city staff and certain members on council who want to eliminate the Urban Forestry Commission. A lot of others. I know we're gonna talk about this later, but this is huge to me. Some members on council are trying to eliminate community input, and community input from groups like ours who have so many experts. I'm not. I mean, I'm an advocate, but I'm not an expert. I don't know. We find ways to have focus groups on things, and some members on council are trying to eliminate any focus on anything.
Yeah, I hear your frustration, and we will talk about it. I guess the way I'm looking at that is, right now we have our commission.
Yeah,
and until the minute that we don't, let's push on.
Okay, cool.
So let's get as far as we can with this process while we can. But I hear you. All right, Sharon.
Parent has always said we need to spend the money now while we can afford to buy the land, because it's just going to get more expensive. And parents in the back of my brain going, we need to spend the money now while we got the money to spend it, because it's only going to cost us more down the line that we may not have that money then to spend. So I'm for doing something with fee and lieu as soon as we can. But I like to spend money, so I'm not.
I know, I hear you. Well, sorry, go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, without getting into specifics, there are also opportunities, especially with forested land acquisition inside the urban area, where the city, by way of fee and lieu, might be able to leverage with outside donors to really make a bigger bang. So I think, early on, we should keep it as simple as possible and focus on some emerging opportunities and, work with a working group within the Urban Forestry Commission. And while we kick the can down the road, waiting to develop the plan. So.
All right. And it's one thing to keep in mind, remember, we're not making the decision. As much as we would like to, we're advising. But the stronger we are with data, support, a framework showing that we've considered as many factors as possible, then I think our recommendations will have more weight and be better received. So it sounds to me like, and you can let me know if we agree, that we should set up a working group, because I've already been working on this with the city, but I'd welcome more help and input if anybody's interested. So if anybody wants to join me. If you're already on a lot of working groups, that's fine. So I'm seeing, go ahead and come off mute if you would like to be on the working group.
I'd be happy to be on it, but I'm not sure if I can. So
I hear you, Donnie. We might as well hold off on that just to see.
I'll be glad to.
Okay, Ed.
I'll be glad to.
Thank you, and Zoe. All right, we could take one more. It's not necessary, but just to avoid a quorum. And of course, anything that the working group does, we'll come back to the group and obviously update and go from there. All right. Well, thanks, Chris, for the information. And we'll start that up with some meetings and plannings between Ed and Zoe and myself. All right. So the next item is the metrics to monitor the ordinance. So this is where what Sharon was talking about. Right now, we get that table that we're getting in our meetings. Now, I'm sure Nancy will cover this a little bit more, but some information will be available to us, but not everything. And if we ask for new information, it really is kind of a one-time thing, because the background work that has to be done to collect data, from the developments as they are input, to organize it and put it through, we can do it, but we don't want to keep changing what that is. So does that make sense? So I'll go ahead and open it up for discussion and ideas. We've touched on this in our regular meetings, but if we want to iron that out a little more here, we can try to get that started from the city side. It might take a while to build it up. Like I said, they have to start with development submissions. What are they going to track? What are they going to deliver? And then it gets pushed all the way through the project. So Sharon, did you want to go ahead? Yeah.
So when we get a development, they give us the percentage of tree canopy that's already put on the plan that we've asked for. So we get a percentage that's existing. And then we get on that whether they're urban or suburban, and depending on the percentage that they're needing to protect, either fee in lieu or protect. So I think we already have the metrics, and I am terrible in math, which is bad. But I think with the knowledge of what we have that's total canopied, what they're fee in lieuing to percentage, and the percentage that they're planting or retaining is a simple math of how much are we losing from that canopy, or are we breaking even? And I think Nancy would know this. That's just the metrics right there are right there. I just don't know how to get there from those percentages. I can look at it and see that we're losing more canopy on developments just by seeing it, but I can't tell you the math to get there. And so I don't think it has to be that complicated. It won't be exacting, but it'll be a rounded amount of figure to say we're losing, we're gaining, we're breaking even. And that would only be on the projects that are coming through TRC. And I don't know whether, I'm seeing only TRC, whether the level ones that this applies to, I'm not sure how that could even be quantified with everything. That may be a big ask for staff. I'm not sure.
So Nancy, I don't know if you want to jump in with your perspective on what we're able to do.
Right. So right now I can pull what I'm pulling. Like that's the value of the fee in lieu. That fee in lieu is based off the value of the tax value of the land. So it's not a simple equation to back out to say that that's this percentage or this square footage of trees that's being removed, because it's based on the parcel specifically. So each one of those calculations is separate and stacked out. So like we can figure out how to probably get there and get the information on the plans and get it into Acela. And then we have to figure out how to pull it out of Acela. All of this takes staff time. And we don't have an Acela person right now. So that pulls this background data out. But it's all that process of updating what people need to put on the plans or what staff need to input when they do the review. So that really is the what information do you want? Do you want to know how many like square footage being removed? I don't necessarily know if on all plans we have that. I can check. Whether that's we have that for some of them, or if they're all by percentage. That's the we can figure out how to get there probably. It's just yeah.
Okay, thanks. Ed, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the metrics that would be valuable would be how much canopy is being lost on a site, how much canopy is being met with fee and lieu, and how much canopy is being met with newly planted trees, and how many trees are being planted. I mean, I think those four elements would really inform us on how things are changing and what those impacts might be.
Yeah, I agree. I wrote down percent canopy, existing, protected, percent fee and lieu and percent loss, and number of trees lost, planted, or preserved.
Right.
So, you know, as close as we can get to that kind of data, then we really have something to work with going forward. Sharon?
We also have the issue of measurements, aerial as opposed to ground. And aerial is not about the amount of trees, it's about the boundary of trees, which is something on my list to discuss with our subcommittee when we meet with staff. Because I'll get on a plan, an aerial, if it's over 1 acre or more, and it's just a boundary of X amount of square feet or acreage. I have no idea whether those trees are on that aerial counting, how many trees there are, and whether they're viable trees or not so good trees or trash trees. Or so when we're doing any aerial, it's just typical aerial. It's just a square footage, so we don't know how many trees are on there. So what I'm noticing now is, as I'm doing this, we've got some issues with how we're quantifying how many trees are on a site, and aerial is one of them. So is that asking too much for the developer to go out in 2 acres and count all the trees that are viable on there? I don't know. That's a discussion, but we won't know how many trees are on an acreage or an aerial view. It's just.
Well, arguably, if you're measuring the actual shapefile of the canopy, ecosystem services are measured based on the canopy and not the number of sticks. The number of sticks really don't matter as much. So if you get an accurate aerial representation of canopy, you really do have a good metric to work with.
Yeah, you would know that more than I, but I was answering Amy's question to counting how many trees. We only count the amount of trees when we're ground counting. And then we're looking at the square footage of the canopy of the tree and the DBH, and we're actually counting physical amounts of trees.
So are you saying different projects have different submission?
Right, we have 2 ways of counting.
Okay.
We've got aerial and we've got ground.
Got it. So that
So
does complicate
aerial
it.
is the larger acreage. We're allowing aerial, and then the smaller acreage, then oftentimes they'll use the ground counting where they're physically counting the trees and giving us the square footage of the tree.
So we might obviously need to break those apart.
Somehow when we're trying.
I think we just get what we can get, you know, because if that's the way they're submitted, then we'll have to have them both.
Right. And what I'm noticing is that they're giving us on the plan the total canopied area in the beginning of the project, percentage wise, to the acreage. So they're saying 63% canopied is what we're working with.
That is on the canopy study.
That is on the canopy study. There we've got that. Right. And then we count down from there a percentage. So they're required to do 15%. And then of that 15%, they may do all of it in tree save, or they may do all of it in fee and lieu. And then the rest of it gets raised down to put up the structure. And we started out with 63% canopied. So we can keep it as simple as that. That Ed just explained is we've got the two ways of counting, aerial and ground. Right. So that would just be the factor.
Okay.
Right, and the reason that we count sticks on smaller scale is that we give a canopy attribute to each tree based on averages, which is, and the numbers that we use are very conservative. So the actual grow out of these trees will be a lot higher than what's reflected with the number of sticks.
Right. Or what's saved in existing. There's a lot more trees. I'll tell you, there's a lot more existing trees being saved than planted, other than needed. So this is working.
That's a good thing.
It's very much working in that arena. It's working.
So for the sake of this piece that we're talking about here, to get this information gathered, Nancy, do you have the information you need from us as far as our wish list?
Please send me a wish list, and Chris and Ricky and I will sit down and figure out how we can do what we can do with it.
Okay. Well, then maybe offline I'll have Sharon and Ed, maybe we can pass around some information on, again, what would we wish for? And then how can we, working through city staff, how can we get as much of that as we can?
Great. The next agenda item, Chris has got to go. We can do it next week at the regular meeting.
Yeah, and that's fine.
Touch on that. We haven't done anything with it. Which
is all we were going to say.
But it's again kind of like, what is the wish list for you all is what those metrics are. And then we have to go see if we can get it from other groups.
Exactly. Okay. Well, I'll touch on that for you, and then we'll circle back with y'all.
All right. I got to head to another meeting.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Maybe I will.
Thank you. So yeah, sorry, the rush of that was some other folks have to go to the budget meeting. Oh, Greg will have to as well. No problem, Greg. Sorry that I couldn't work it in. Maybe we'll have you at one of our regular meetings with an update.
I'd love to. Great to see everyone. Thanks for all that you do.
Yep. Thank you so much. All right. Which actually brings us to our next piece. This was also sort of a wish list item. Right now, the city does not calculate or gather in any one place tree planting or removal metrics overall. So how many trees were planted, even by the city itself. Each individual department or project has that information, but it's not collected in one place. So really, the whole line item here was that's where we're at. Obviously, I think this group would agree that we would want that data. And so the conversation was, is it going to be possible? What is it going to take to gather it in one place, short of an urban forester organizing that for us? But without that, what can we do to help spearhead or help or align that sort of information? So for now, I think we'll sort of table that together with this other conversation on metrics and just see where it goes. Right now, we'll push it up to city staff and see where their roadblocks are, and then see if we can help with that or, get it processed a little farther. Go ahead, Dawn.
I just want to throw out there that there seems to be, the city has a really good, robust mapping, I don't know what to call it, but they do a lot of mapping of different parameters. And so it seems like we could have something set up where when a tree inventory is eventually done, that it can be imported into the map. But in the meantime, we can also add trees that are planted and have like their planting year associated with them, perhaps, as just a way to centralize this information. Because I could continue to gather the information from different departments and collate it, but then it's just sitting at Greenworks. It's not kind of included and institutionalized. So I think it'd be better used if it were part of the city's GIS data.
Absolutely. Well, and so going back, so Planet Geo, they kind of touched on their tree plotter software. That's theirs, but a lot of these consulting firms have software out there. And when you get an inventory done from these firms, that's where it goes, is into software that then, depending on the budgeting of the city, can be used long term. And so, yeah, that would ultimately be the goal with the Urban Forest Master Plan plus inventory that we're pushing for, includes that software capability for tracking and planning so that it would be all in one place. Again, we're not there. So what can we do in the meantime, other than Dawn having to call every department to get their data, which is great. But so for now, again, it's a wish list. Can development services be the spearhead of gathering this information in one place, is kind of where we're trying to go with it. So any other questions or comments on sort of these pieces with metrics and inventory? Again, I think we all know this is because we don't yet have the actual data that we need with an on-the-ground inventory. All right. Okay, well, we'll see how far we can get with that. So next we had the boards and commissions restructuring. I threw it in here so that we could kind of talk about it because we're in development services, so it kind of fit in here. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time in this meeting talking about this specific issue. I think obviously we're all on this board for a reason. We would love to see it continue, and there's lots of reasons why we need a tree board, is sort of the broad term, Urban Forestry Commission for the city. What I would encourage everybody to do is look for those emails. Haley sent out the last email for the comment sessions where we can get involved. And in those packets is the email where they're collecting comments. I think it's I don't want to misquote it. It is restructurepilot@publicinput.com. That's the best way for us to get information sent up on the process. So if all of us send an email, as members, as citizens, that these are our specific concerns. So what's going to happen to our TRC oversight? What's going to happen to alternative compliance? What's going to happen to all the expertise that's in this commission? And how can we ensure that we have that conduit between community and city government, right? So I think, you guys probably have other concerns, but those are the ones that I've already sent up. But I would just encourage everybody to use that email to send up the concerns and attend as many of those public sessions as you can. Go ahead, Cecil.
I would urge all of you to connect with as many people as you are connected with to absolutely oppose what's being proposed. This is a straightforward effort by development interests to limit the input of the community into all kinds of decisions. This has been bandied since I was on city council several years ago. The idea that, well, there's too many people offering their opinions. That to me is like democracy, and it's transparency. And currently, I've learned that the council is engaged in the idea of having closed door meetings with members of staff present that are not put out to the public in any way, where they discuss significant issues that are coming forward to make decisions outside of public scrutiny. I mean, this is, to me, this is absolutely critical. This is, I really can't more emphasize that than this. We've got to fight this thing. We must fight this thing. Okay, I guess that's enough. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. And again, we're all here for a reason, and I think we want to continue with our work. And aside from even the higher level issues that Cecil was addressing.
Exactly. I mean, the reason we're all here is because we have interest or expertise in, and thank you for so many of you who have expertise. We're here to focus what we know to help the city, and what this reformatting thing that the city is involved in is to diminish the input of people who care, to diminish the people who know, to limit it to four groups instead of however many committees we have now. 4 groups who will discuss things. This is frightening to me. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah. So stay involved. Go ahead. I think Patrick.
Yes. Sorry. Can you cancel me out so I can come back in?
There are 2. You're logged in twice. Might be the problem, Patrick.
Yeah, I don't know how to unlog my.
There. Hopefully that did it.
Did that work?
Yeah. There you go.
Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you. So, and we'll be talking about this later about our priorities for the rest of the year. And I'm certain that in those priorities is going to be the revision of Chapter 20 that deals with the planting, maintenance, and removal of trees on public property, as well as amendments to the tree canopy preservation ordinance, and including the proposed tree planting standards, both in the UDO, excuse me, and in the standards and specifications manual. And so I had asked for a meeting to be set up with city staff regarding the revision of Chapter 20. And the reply that I got from Nancy, and I'm sorry that she had to leave, indicated that there was some confusion about how to proceed with these working group initiatives with city staff, given the fact that there is this proposal to potentially do away with the Urban Forestry Commission. So if Ben is still in the meeting, I'd like to ask for his response to that, because
Ben is
Pardon?
he's Ben has gone over to the budget meeting with council.
Okay.
But I can ask if he's available to jump over here for a minute. 1 second, please.
Actually, Haley, can you pause on that? We're not quite there yet. Sorry about some noise in the background. Let's wait just a moment because we'll have to talk about this when we get to our planning and priorities. We need to get through our department updates first.
Okay, yeah, just
so sorry,
follow
Patrick.
them.
We'll revisit it, and they might be able to come back after their budget meeting. So is that okay? We can just table that for just a moment.
Okay.
Because I agree it ties in here, but let's tie it in when we're talking about the working group work. Thank you. Sharon, this will be our last comment on the boards and commissions thing, so we can get our department people out of here. Sharon, you're on mute.
Sorry. I was invited to what the second group, which was called the stakeholders group. And I was the only one, of course, that spoke other than Dee Williams. And I've got a 1 page of notes that I'll probably present with the work of another group I'm involved in. But I want to talk a lot about my group and the term equity that was bandied about, to have involved the working groups with the people that are in the community. And that is what my group was focused on, is the members of the community that are not involved in boards and commissions now, and that they can be involved in working groups. And I made some comments about the intellectual knowledge that we carry from our board and commission to a working group, that if we pull somebody up from the community that doesn't have the expertise, and we have to train them on the knowledge in the working group, because then the working group is dissolved. But there was an equity, a stakeholders group I was a part of, and equity was bandied about. So that will be something that will need to be discussed somewhere down the line, because that ties in to what a part of the community sees wrong with our boards and commissions.
That's a good point. Again, I don't think we have time to get into every detail of this restructuring here. So apologies, that's just not going to be what we're going to be able to do right now. So let's move on from this for now. But what I just wanted to make sure is that everybody's aware and getting the messaging from the city. Send your comments and emails to that email that's in the stuff that they're sending out, and be involved as much as you can. So I think that's where we're going to have to end it for now, but we will revisit. All right, so I'm actually going to skip around. I don't see Jade. Ricky, are you representing someone else, or are you just hanging out?
I'm just filling in for Chris and Nancy, just kind of help Haley out. So I'm just here.
Oh, and sorry I didn't introduce you, Ricky Hurley from DSC. Awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and Mark's been patiently waiting. So let's talk with Mark Foster, City Arborist. Just some background. Donna and I met with Mark maybe 2 weeks ago now, just to talk about some more collaboration and coordination between our group and the City Arborist, which we know we work closely with Mark. He's at all our meetings, which is wonderful. I really appreciate it. But he had some ideas that I'm sure he'll talk about here about how we could do a little more to work together. So Mark, did you want to go ahead with that?
Yeah. To sort of recap, what I was interested in was building upon the partnerships that are growing between the Urban Forest Council, or excuse me, the Urban Forestry Commission, the Development Services Department with the fee and lieu money that becomes available for either buying trees or buying land on which trees grow, and the Parks Department. You know, I for pretty much as long as I've been city arborist, I've been planting trees every year, but the places I have to plant them are not fantastic mostly. You know, in all candor, most of those places kind of stink. They're narrow little strips of grass in between sidewalks and roads, or in a tree pit downtown. And we would get more bang for our efforts growing trees on pieces of land that can allow them to grow full root systems and full canopies and have, you know, something approaching better soil nutrition. And so, you know, get more canopy for your efforts. And so by collaborating with parks to try and locate areas of parks where, you know, dead trees have been removed and new ones need to go back, that won't interfere with, you know, parks master plans on, you know, how the park is supposed to look in the next 20 years or whatever, or get in the way of people, you know, using open space to recreate with their kids and dogs and whatever. And then tying in development services with fee and lieu money to help pay for trees going in those locations. I feel that's the best way to go forward with planting on city properties. And, you know, of course, realistically knowing that city properties amount to a small fraction of the amount of, you know, wooded land in the city limits. And of course, you all know that. That's why you've been as dedicated as you've been in trying to protect trees on private property. So anyway, I wanted to make the full commission aware of that, you know, where I was going with that conversation with Amy and Dawn, and also sort of invite the commission and Greenworks and the volunteers that help Greenworks to, you know, to the extent that the public land is contributing to canopy, get involved, you know, hands-on with efforts to get trees planted and established, you know, in this partnership framework. You know, I have a couple tree crews when I'm fully staffed. I mean, I'm up to 70%, and so we're getting there. We're almost back to 2 tree crews, and a couple roadside mowing tractors. So it's not a lot of assets, but it is assets. People who have equipment and skill sets that are not available to the general public. And so, you know, we work on keeping the roads usable from encroachment by vegetation and cutting down dead trees before they fall down, you know. But where the partnership we've been talking about can help is in getting new trees into the ground. And there's a lot of that already going on. I mean, Dawn and Greenworks giving away as many trees as you do every year. I mean, that way outstretches, you know, the amount of trees that I'm getting in the ground, you know? And so you got a lot more reach there. And then once those trees are in the ground, they're going to need some tending, you know? And so the partnership efforts toward, you know, initial pruning and watering and mulching, you know, the mulching and tree guards where they're useful. I'm really bothered by how many young trees I anticipate not surviving into maturity because of weed eater damage. You know, 100 years ago, during the last building boom, when people were planting a lot of trees along the streets and in the parks and so forth, the weed eater didn't exist. And so that kind of injury didn't occur, but it's routine now. And so, you know, if you don't come back with something to protect the trees, they get destroyed before they even really get up to a size where they're delivering benefits. So, you know, working on those kind of tasks, those are things, let me check my list in case I missed anything important here, as well as talking to residents, you know, taking the temperature of a neighborhood that might be underserved and needs more trees. And, you know, if there are planting spaces to be had in the parks or in wider planting strips that can accommodate larger trees, you know, going after those contacts and finding out if there's a desire in the neighborhood for the trees. You know, I mean, sometimes you have folks who really don't want trees in their neighborhood. But doing that outreach, planting, installing, as we talked about, inventory work. I mean, that if money is not found to do an inventory, doing an inventory is something that Greenworks folks and community volunteers and the commission, those are all obtainable things. I mean, they're not 40,000 foot, you know, planning and analysis type stuff that turn some folks cranks, but it gets things done that need to be done, you know. Let's see. You know, the city, what we have to offer is, you know, buying the trees or buying the land, you know, identifying locations where trees can be planted, you know, or land that is growing trees and, you know, that will hopefully be there for a long time. We can buy the trunk guards and the mulch. We pay the water bill to water the trees, you know. So, you know, we have different things that we bring to this partnership if we can have this partnership. I mean, so far the partnership has sort of mostly been, you know, Dawn giving away a whole bunch of trees for people to plant, and, you know, my staff and I running around trying to take care of the risk stuff. Before this meeting, I came back from a tree limb that was busted off downtown and laying on the sidewalk. So I drove a truck out there with a saw and got it cut up, threw it in the back of the truck and brought it back here. You know, I mean, everybody is doing stuff in my section. And so I invite you all to go more hands-on. So that's that bit. The reason in part why I'm so interested in seeing some partnership on tree planting is because my money for planting trees is not always fantastic, and it has to compete with the need to contract out work for, you know, those dead tree removals and so forth. I often talk about my backlog, but I've never actually showed it to you. This is what it looks like. This is over 2 years worth of backlog of tree work that enhances public safety and keeps the city from getting sued. and people from getting hurt, that sort of thing. And that's not what 2 tree crews can accommodate, So back in the spring and early summer, I contracted out 7 jobs. In the late summer and the fall, I contracted out 11 jobs, and I need to contract out more. I need to keep doing it until the money's gone. So what that's going to leave me for planting this year, I'm planting 12 trees. And that's it. It's mostly centered in Central Business District where, you've got most heat island effect, and then a couple in areas outlying to that. But planting, I hope, is something that this partnership can step up to and enhance. And, the Parks Department is already planting trees, like Dawn mentioned when she has to, go around all the different city silos to find out who's planting trees. It's not just me, so that work is happening, but the money that I have needs to go toward things that relate to people's safety. I work in the streets division of the Public Works Department. I need people using my streets to be able to use those streets and to not worry about things falling on them, and hopefully quit calling me so much and asking, when am I going to cut this dead tree down? So that was pretty much it. Give you an update on where I'm at with staffing, talk about the partnership, talk about what my planting capacity is this year, and see if you all had any questions.
Thanks, Mark. Any questions for Mark? Go ahead, Per.
Well, it just occurs to me, Mark, that your suggestion that we get involved in some kind of hands-on tree planting activity around the city could be a nice demonstration to the city of the value of the Urban Forestry Commission and why we're relevant and why, we are addressing present day needs of the city. We could get a nice little, maybe some reporters might want to come out and take some pictures of some school kids planting trees with us or something like that. It really could, it could have tangible benefits for the city and demonstrate why we're relevant at the same time, which is something we need to do at the moment anyway. So I just wanted to throw that idea out there.
I agree.
Good. Thanks. Cecil?
Yeah, I totally encourage people to support Mark and his work. I've kind of lost track of my intention in mentioning this, but we need to focus on how we replace trees from whatever angle we come at it. Mark is governing what the city does, but we need to personally think about our properties and how we do new trees. Anyway, sorry that's random, but that's my thought.
Well, I think that actually ties in something that Mark mentioned that we talked about before was sort of that education and public outreach piece. What else can we do as a commission with that, public facing side,
Right.
Even if
Right.
it's just education events, things like that.
And, with all the trees that are made available to the public through Greenworks and other sources, educating the public so that they don't repeat mistakes that were made 100 years ago would just make my day. Putting a large maturing tree in a 2-foot wide grass strip, that's not a good idea. There's going to be heartbreak down the road. Putting a large maturing tree directly underneath a power line or next to it, there's going to be heartbreak. Don't be that person. Don't, because when a lot of the trees that are, mature now in the city were planted, there were power lines overhead. You know, I mean, Asheville had power back into the 19-teens. And so somebody, when they were planning the neighborhood or planning their individual tree out in the yard, whatever, they didn't look up. You know, they didn't think that through. And, you know, you can get as mad as you want about the power company contractor making ugly pruning. Well, you also want lights when it's stormy, you know, and you want to be able to power your iPads and whatnot. So if you want to stay in the 21st century, the trees can't get up in the power lines. So don't plant them underneath them in the first place. That's how to fix that, you know. Trees need to be planted in places where they can grow up big and happy and strong and beneficial, and not be stuck in some god-awful setting that's, you know, going to be a death trap for them, and they're not going to be able to live up to their potential. So that's something that you can totally be important in educating the general public about when those trees are being handed out or other times.
And, you know, not that it's just commission members, you know, doing this. We need to partner.
No, exactly. No, what? Sorry, as I say that, I'm envisioning the partnership that I was talking about. Yeah,
it's everybody together. So,
Yeah.
Zoe, go ahead.
This is a partially naive question of a new commission member, and maybe something that has already been discussed in the past, but who determines what's planted on the housing authority lands? Are those considered city properties?
They are a different body politic in the city.
I've heard that.
Yeah. I guess council has some say in electing their, you know, board of commissioners or whatever, but they don't report to the city manager. They're not in the same chain of command as myself or Parks or those folks. So they
Dawn's
make their
dealt
own.
with them before. So I
Okay.
think she's going to probably address that. Yeah, go ahead, Dawn.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to that too. Yes, the Housing Authority of the City of Asheville, HACA, is a separate private enterprise that interacts with the city and has some city funding through various funding channels. But the decisions about the properties are made by the Housing Authority. And Greenworks has partnered with the Housing Authority on numerous occasions to plant trees and orchards. So, and they've been very open and supportive. There's often unused, underutilized space, open space in housing developments. So we've been able to help plant trees in those communities.
But yeah, it's not technically city land, you know, so it's not just the city
It,
involved.
yeah, it's considered public, but not city.
Managed privately.
Yes, private management. I wanted to add something to the discussion. I have mixed feelings about the Urban Forestry Commission doing projects, like doing a planting project with children, for example, like Perrin suggested. I'm not against that. I fully support that, but I think it kind of blurs the lines of what our commission is and should be doing. And, you know, community nonprofit organization partners like Greenworks should be doing projects and leading projects like that. I think that, you know, our role as a board and commission is to advise council and work with staff. And I think that's what we should focus on doing. And certainly, you know, as the opportunities come up where Greenworks is partnering with the city, then Urban Forestry Commission members are always invited to get involved in that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is it in our scope? I think what is in our scope is to be I look at it sort of like the pivot between the city and the nonprofits and the arborists and the, you know, we can coordinate those kinds of things. Like when we had the symposium, that was not an Urban Forestry Commission tree symposium, but we did play a large role in coordinating those efforts. So perhaps, you know, that would kind of be the role that we play. You know, we can sort of initiate and coordinate. But you're right, it's probably not really our scope. However, we can push for, you know, these different things to happen as well.
Well, I think you being present at Greenworks activities with the community, I mean, that shows your participation in the whole scope of the process, you know, and getting trees off to a good start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, Sharon, and I think this will have to be our last comment on this particular point.
Yeah, I agree with Dawn. I mean, because I'm a contractor, I got involved with my neighborhood and we did the bulb outs with Mark, and I helped the community plant the bulb outs and ordered the plants and watered them in. And then South French Broad neighborhood contacted me, and with Mark, they planted the trees and I watered them for a year. But I have a truck and I got a tank and I got a worker, and I've been digging holes since I've been 18. So, you know, that's my area of expertise, and that's why people call me. I think we all have, we're all able to dig a hole, but I think it'd be a waste of Ed's energy to go out and dig a hole. You know, he'd be better off if we drag him out to talk to him about the aspect of it. So I think we all need to look at our involvement on the community and what we can best do to help our neighborhoods, and then keep in mind what Mark is looking for. And if Mark has got a neighborhood like the South French Broad that doesn't know that I exist and they're establishing trees, they can email me and say, hey, Sharon, can you establish these trees over on so-and-so with your water tank? And I can say, yes, I've got time to do that, because that's my area of expertise and what I'm able to do. But if you were to call me out to assess a tree, I couldn't do that worth a darn. So, you know, we've got to take a look. We're all on here for whatever we bring as our expertise, and hearing what Mark has to say. I think I can help myself with Mark, and if he needed to help, he can reach out to me. But I agree with Dawn. We're all not organized to bring the kids in to help, you know, kind of situation.
Thank you.
Just one afterthought. Sometimes I dig holes so deep I can't get out of them.
He's real good at digging. That's great. Don't we all? Okay. Well, thank you, Mark. Interestingly, when we were talking to Mark, he's like, here's my thoughts on planting and inventory and education. When we get to priorities, my list says planting, inventory, education. So I think we're aligned. It's just a matter of process to get there. So as long as we keep in communication, I think we'll make those steps. So thanks, Mark.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. So we did have Jade Dundas from Capital Improvements said he'd be here to give us an update. Now, his update was just going to be generally on capital improvements projects, so apparently he couldn't make it. But we do have hopefully for our regular meeting, we'll have an update on Vermont Avenue and some other projects. So we'll just have to table that for now. Same with Parks and Rec. I've been trying to really get in touch with Parks and Rec, so we'll have to see. Again, that's, I think, a piece where we could have better collaboration. And they have a new director, so hopefully we can initiate those conversations with getting, the trees and parks connection stronger. So that brings us to Greenworks and overall Greenworks update from Dawn.
Thank you. Yeah, Greenworks has a lot going on. Some of these are updates and some of these are notices about upcoming things. So I think I've mentioned before that Greenworks has partnered with the city of Asheville on installing an in-ground tree nursery at Hardesty Lane out by the nature center and the sports park over there, Azalea Road area. And we have 100 trees planted in ground that are meant to grow bigger so that they can be transplanted to public spaces, and the larger trees can sustain more of the rigors of being planted in an urban environment. They'll be planted on public land, so they will be given to the city of Asheville. We also have a container nursery at the Buncombe County Sports Complex. So this is in partnership with Buncombe County. It's we had the capacity to raise 2,000 trees from seedlings to saplings, and we got a grant to expand that, also supported by other private funders. So we now have the capacity to grow 4,000 trees, and we are growing that many. And we grow these trees up for planting, but also for giving away at our 2 annual tree giveaways. So we do one in the fall and one in the spring. The spring one is coming up on April 24th, and it'll be held at the nursery. If you haven't been to one before, you're welcome to come and volunteer or to come and pick up plants. The registration will open probably a month before, so towards the end of March, and they go pretty quickly. They're free, but you have to register, and we usually sell out or run out within a day. So we plan to give away about 1,000 trees. That was our annual goal for our tree giveaways, but now it's become our twice annual goal. So we're trying to give away 2,000 trees each year to folks and then any residents of Buncombe County to plant on private property. We also this past fall did partner with the Housing Authority and did a tree planting in the Hillcrest Apartments, and we planted or helped the community plant. There were a bunch of volunteers that came out from the community to plant 40 service berries. And so that was a fun day. We got a lot done in a short period of time. We're also continuing our Tree Keeper series. So we have a neighborhood Tree Keeper series that we've been doing for 3 or so years now. And we're doing a targeted one for the Lakeview neighborhood, as well as just training folks in general. Mostly folks have been volunteering at the tree nursery or coming out to tree plantings with us to volunteer. But the ultimate goal is to have folks take on more responsibility for both keeping an eye on public trees or even private property trees, issues that crop up in a neighborhood that might not get noticed and taken care of right away. Also doing some light pruning and tree planting as well. And so maybe to help chip away at that huge backlog that Mark showed us in maintenance requests. We're also applying for American Rescue Plan Act funds. We won't find out probably till end of March, maybe April, if we are going to receive these, but Greenworks has applied in partnership with the YMI Cultural Center to start a arboriculture training program for young people of color, primarily to get trained in the tree service industry and having kind of this 3-pronged outcome or impact of engaging young people in workforce development in jobs that are less susceptible to the ups and downs of the economy, and especially things like COVID. So a lot of young people work in retail and hospitality, and those were the industries most heavily impacted right away by COVID. And young people often experience at least twice as much unemployment rates as the general population. So hopefully add to some stability, to good paying career jobs that are in high demand, and also the hands-on projects that they would be working on would be in communities that we've identified as being having a high heat vulnerability index or having a low tree canopy. And so there's that, as well as mitigating the effects of climate change, so heat island and also flooding and stormwater management. So we're hoping to get that, and that would be a 3-year grant that we would start on this summer. The other couple of things I want to mention is we have our Treasured Trees program that's going strong. It's run by a group of really dedicated volunteers that help community deal with the nominations that come in for Treasured Trees, and then go out and deliver plaques and award the certificates for them. So we have a number of Treasured Trees, and we'll be highlighting them in our social media and in our newsletters. We also, as part of our partnership with the City of Asheville, have kept up our Tree City USA designation for the past 42 years, I think it's been. And so I work with Mark Foster on this certification each year, and the requirements are having a tree board, an active tree board, holding an Arbor Day celebration, and dedicating a certain amount of funding towards tree care and maintenance. So right now we have all those things. If our tree board goes away, I don't know what we'll do, but yeah, so that's of concern for many, and for other reasons, having the Urban Forestry Commission be dissolved. And then the last thing I want to mention is that the Ravenscroft Reserve Initiative to preserve a half acre of forested property on the south slope from development is still going. We have a fundraising campaign right now called Guardians of the Forest, and we're looking for major donors to sponsor a tree, one of the 24 mature oak trees that are on the property, for $25,000 each. And so right now we have 3 sponsors for trees, and are always seeking out more. But in talking to a consultant about this, one of their concerns that they've heard brought up in talking to other people about the potential of sponsoring trees or helping to support this initiative is that the city of Asheville is not coming to the table with any sort of support for this project. So I see the potential of using the fee and lieu funds to purchase this property, at least in part. If the property is $600,000, if the city could put forth at least half of that, that would be a huge vote of confidence for donors to then say, okay, the city has some skin in the game, let's jump on board. And that's the thing that's holding a lot of people back. So it's been a frustration of mine that we can't get this property purchased. So I would like to continue that conversation of, how can we use these fee and lieu funds or other city funds that are coming through to not just react to the impacts of urban deforestation, but to preserve some areas that have mature trees that are serving a very important purpose right now. So I'll keep you posted on that, but please think about that as we go forward and review the fee and lieu funds. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Yes, and Perrin makes a good point. The Tree City USA thing, I put that up the line in my email. But yeah, that is one of the requirements for Tree City USA is to have an active tree board. So mention that as well. It's funny you mentioned Ravenscroft Reserve. I mean, where else is a parcel like that downtown? It's a unicorn. What price can you put on a unicorn? I mean, we gotta get it. So we'll see. We'll see if we can do that. Thanks, Dawn. Any questions for Dawn in Greenworks? So I wanted to go to break, but we were able to get Ben to jump in from his other meeting. So I did want to circle back to Patrick's comment, and it'll tie in a moment when we are also talking about working groups. But thanks, Ben, for jumping back in. And I'll sum up and I'll let Patrick talk about it. But what was happening is we've been doing all this work, for example, on the policy, chapter 20 and pieces like that. And so now there's concern with the potential restructuring of boards and commissions. How do we get our committee work pushed up the line to the city? How does that process look? And Patrick, let me know if I'm not phrasing that properly.
No, you put it pretty succinctly. Ben, this came up when I asked about scheduling a meeting with city staff from DSD and Public Works to review the Chapter 20 revision that Ed and I worked on and get the process going to get agreement on that and push that forward. And as you well know, we also, the urban forestry policy group wants to meet with DSD and talk about some amendments to the tree canopy preservation ordinance. And I just wanted to know from your perspective, are these initiatives going to go forward, or is there going to be some hesitation because of the uncertainty about the outcome of the boards and commission restructuring plan?
All these will move forward. Matter of fact, Patrick, on the Chapter 20 consolidation, I've been in a meeting or two with you and Ed on that. And credit to Nancy, she just set up a meeting this week. I guess it was Monday. It'd have to be Monday to discuss that. And so there's a group of city staff that are now reviewing that Chapter 20 to move that forward. I know Chris is working with you guys on the tree protection ordinance, and that will, everything that we're doing with you, we plan to continue moving forward. The part of the question I can't answer, Patrick, is, and that's a really good question, is how do the priorities of these commissions not get lost in the shuffle of all this, if it happens? So I don't know where that's going to land, but I think that's a really good question, because Patrick, we just mentioned two things that are being worked on, but I know this board's working on a lot of other things as well. And so maybe what I can commit is after this meeting, let me go to the clerk's office and ask that question. What happens to the priorities that are important that staff's collaborating with boards on? Where do they go? And I guess really how do we assure that those don't kind of fall off the cliff, so to speak? So
well,
I'm happy to explore that and track down an answer for you guys. Maybe we'll have it for your next meeting next week.
Good. Well, I appreciate that. And the other concern is if we kick these cans down the road, and we reach the point where we're going to take it to city council, I really hope that whatever happens to the outcome of the boards and commissions restructuring, that the city council will give serious considerations to these initiatives and to these UDO changes, and not just say, there's not going to be an urban forestry commission anymore, so why take action? So my only final comment is that I think we need to get these initiatives done sooner rather than later to increase the chances that they do reach council and they do get enacted.
All right. Thanks, Patrick and Ben. Ed, you had something there?
Yeah, I'm thinking that we should just act as if these changes aren't happening until they happen. And my experience with anything municipal is that it runs slower than frozen molasses. So even though it looks like this train may have left the station, it really hasn't gone anywhere yet. So we should just keep plugging along and make believe it doesn't exist. I am in denial too, so that's part of the problem.
Right. All right, Farron.
Well, I'll second that, Ed. I'm a big advocate of using your power while you have it. And I just want to, the issue that Patrick, that you raised and that Ben was speaking to is sort of at the heart of what I've been trying to understand about the proposal. It's apparent to me from the way that UFC works that we do have a bottom-up route for ideas and initiatives to filter their way up to council from us down here on the UFC. And I imagine the same is true of other committees and commissions within the city. It's my impression, and I'm still trying to sort through this, but it's my impression that looking at the flow charts that are in the slideshows that you included on the agenda for this retreat, Amy, it does appear to me that they're reversing the flow of direction. And so it's the council committees that decide what the direction is. And then sort of those bodies that sit below them figure out how to what the direction or what the specifics of that should be. So it does appear to be reversing a bottom-up opportunity into a top-down directive. And that is my primary concern with this proposal.
And again, a lot of it is as clear as mud, but I totally agree that that is the perception, at least the appearance of the structure that they gave. And so again, in my email through to the website, that was a big part of it, was where is the community input coming from in this process, which had me think of something else that was relevant. Shoot, I'll think of it in a moment. It wasn't about the restructuring. Oh, so as far as the council priorities, so in that restructuring, we have council priorities, council committee. If you take that top-down approach, what we can do in the meantime is have a full understanding of the council priorities and align what we're sending up to those, so that, if that's the way they're thinking, we need to be in that lane. So anything that we move up to council, we really need to think about how it aligns with those council priorities and spell that out to city council. So anyway, just a thought on that. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Amy. And, Perrin is correct in his assessment of the restructuring. In the first focus group that Amy and Donna and I attended on this restructuring plan, I made the point that under the, if the plan was implemented, the likelihood of the tree canopy preservation ordinance coming down from the council to an advisory board to a working group would be highly unlikely, because that was an initiative that this commission identified as a real problem, and we communicated that with city staff and worked with them to get that tree canopy preservation ordinance written and through the process and to the city council, which then enacted it. I'm not sanguine that that kind of initiative would ever occur under the restructuring plan as the city is now proposing it.
Yeah, good points. Okay, did anybody have anything else for Ben? I don't know, Ben, if you need to go back to the other meeting.
I was watching the budget work session.
Yeah.
That's what I was doing. So, but no, I'm okay. I'm okay to hang out if you've got questions or need me.
Do we have anything else for Ben right now? If there's nothing else this minute, why don't we go ahead and take let's see, about a 7-minute break. Let's come back at 4:05 and reconvene with the rest of our discussion. So quick break. See you at 4:05. All right, I have 4:05. So if you're here, you can come back on camera so I know you're here, and then we'll move on. All right, so with it being 4:05, obviously we had hoped and planned for a 4:30 end. At this point, we are just down to commission discussion on planning and priorities. So Haley knows that we may go beyond 4:30, but as long as we can all stay, we can stay till we are done.
I wanted to go to a council meeting. Do you think we'll be done?
I want to be done by 5, so let's put a hard stop.
Okay.
5 or a little before.
I'd like to go to council.
Oh, is that tonight? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay. So, and actually I can kind of jump over a whole piece of this. Under working groups, I just wanted to acknowledge the work that has been done on working groups that are actually already done with their work and have been dissolved in the past year. So we had set up the mission statement working group, for example, where we revised the mission statement, got that accepted by the group, and we're still working on getting that implemented into some of the city materials like the ordinances and things like that. But that group's work is completed. The TRC working group was just me and Sharon getting a better, or for me, getting a better understanding of how that process works, seeing if it would have been possible to write up a procedures for that. But honestly, after working on that and going to some of the meetings, it's far too technical. It just really requires someone like Sharon with that level of expertise to do that job, which as a volunteer is just amazing. So once again, thank you, Sharon. You are the rock star in the realm of that. So that has been dissolved. And then open space, as we know, is an ongoing issue with the city, but our working group work was quite successful in being a part of that task force, reporting back to the commission, the spin-off group that came out of that work with the planting standards. I think those were all really great successes. And I just wanted to recognize that we did a lot of work last year that has been completed. And so now we can move on with our ongoing working groups and then potential working groups that we might want to set up for the next year, depending on our priorities and planning. So ongoing working groups are our policy working group and our budget working group. So I don't think we need to get into updates today. We're going to have our regular meeting next week for updates on those. So I just want to confirm that these are working groups that we want to keep, and the membership of those is aligned how we want. If anybody wants to change their, work on any of these working groups, we can talk about that. So any comments from those groups or individuals that would like to make any changes? Or are we just good? Go ahead, Ed. You're on mute, Ed.
Sorry about that. Assuming that the budget working group succeeds in their mission, which was to fund an urban forester position in an urban forest master plan, in that capacity, they no longer need to exist, except that maybe it would be appropriate that they transition into the interim P and Lieu working group and continue on that way. But I'm assuming that we're going to succeed this year.
I love it. I know, me too. Well, for now, I think, because we're not done with this budget cycle, I think we just keep going with that group. And, I'm hoping we can, work some of those one-on-one council meetings and things like that during this budget cycle. And then, I absolutely am hopeful that come June, July, that we will dissolve that group because it has succeeded. So we'll see where we end up with that. But yeah, that would be great if that could be one that's done. So, so then I guess for now we'll just keep going. I know these groups have been working and are, active behind the scenes. So we'll keep going with those. All right. Which brings us to potential working groups, which actually, let's just wait a minute and talk about planning and priorities and see if we have a need for adding any working groups. The next thing on the agenda is the rules and procedures manual. I don't know if anybody got a chance to take a look at that. So city staff, mostly Nancy, Haley, Ben, had been working on, so there was a document that's a template from, I know I'm not going to remember, it's a University of North Carolina system. the legal school. And so we were using the template and just kind of making some adjustments as needed for our particular situation. So where we're at with that is seeking input from the entire commission on some of the details that are in there to see if there's anything we need to adjust, and then potentially adopting that as a guiding document for our commission. So go ahead and have questions, comments. So go ahead, Sharon.
Of course, I look for conflicts of interest, right? And it says, no commission member shall take part in the consideration, deliberation, or vote in any case in which the member is personally or financially interested. Now, I come to the point of personally because, as you all know, I've been personally involved in several projects that I have not taken the Urban Forestry Commission in, but I have taken a stand against. And so if that project that I was particularly peeved at and spoke against the council and come to say, let's say, alternative compliance, I probably would have stepped back and stepped away if that alternative compliance would have anything to do with my interest in that development. But my problem is the term personally. That's not a legal term. I would say as a member, I mean, it's like biased. I'm open to change. I can change my mind, have changed my mind. I voted things for open space that I changed my mind on later. I mean, I've done all kinds of things. So I'm not sure that, and maybe Perrin would know this, if personally is a legal term or it can be used because.
And actually, can I jump in? Because there is, and you make a really good point. There is actually a separate conflicts of interest policy from the city for city staff and boards and commissions members that we're already governed by. It's part of what we all get when we sign on to boards and commissions.
Right.
And that is very specific in stating that it's a financial interest in a project that we were voting on. So a personal interest does not preclude you from voting on, for example, an alternative compliance situation. So we need to, it sounds to me like what we need to do is go into the rules and procedures manual and align that section with the existing city policy. Because we're not trying to rewrite that policy.
Right. And I can personally get involved in the development and be all hot and bothered by it. And so then someone could say, well, you're personally involved in that, Sharon. Well, no, I have an opinion on it. But unless I'm financially involved in it or legally involved in it, personally, as I've got an opinion.
Yes, you can still vote on it for alternative compliance. Now, there is a zone where, you know, the thing that you cannot do is express your personal interest and point of view while, you know, tying that to the commission, if that makes sense. So you can say you're on the commission, but you cannot express a point of view that would imply that it's the entire commission's.
That's correct. And I have made sure that I've made that distinction when I have done that, because I've read the other booklets that I've been given, and I also know better.
Right. So that is a concern. But you make a good point. So we'll look at that specific section on conflicts of interest and align it with the existing policy.
Well, and just take this into consideration as well. The other kind of a conflict of interest that's not financial is familial. So if you have a relative, a close relative, somebody who lives with you, et cetera, who stands to gain something, even if it wasn't financial, it could be a career advancement, or I mean, there's other ways to look at a benefit. So that's the personal aspect of it, I think, is where people have, it's sort of like personal interest once removed, you know, because it's family members. So that is in there, and that's traditionally a part of the concept of conflict of interest, but just take that into consideration as well.
Yeah. So like I said, our goal with the rules and procedures manual is not to rewrite those existing policies. So we just need to put it in there the same as it is in the other. So good point. Thank you. So I guess actually this might be something we'd want a working group on to finalize what that document will look like. So I've been working with the city. Sorry, I just got cat attacked. Okay. I've been working with the city on that document. So I can continue with that, but if anybody else wants to, make it a group effort, we can jump in.
I read it. I thought it was a very good, clear document.
Okay.
So thank you for all your work you did on that. I just had
it was less me. Really, that's for Nancy, Haley, Ben.
Yeah, that was the only of reading all those. What was it? 14 pages. That was the only question I had. So
okay, good.
For me, that was good.
Thanks. All right, Ed.
Yeah. So when would it be an appropriate time to raise a couple of questions I do have concerning some elements within the document?
Well, I guess that's a good question. Do we want to take the time now, or do we want to, put that to a regular meeting? I'm open to either way. It might be more appropriate to put it on a agenda item at a regular meeting to get into those details. I guess at this point we want to introduce that we're working on this so that everybody can align their questions, and then maybe we'll meet back up to finalize some of those.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate, not to kick the can down the road, but to give us a chance to send somebody, maybe if you do form a working group, send some input with recommendations for change.
Okay.
Because there's a couple of things in there that are a little clunky and hard to understand that I would like to clarify.
Okay. So we could do a working group, or you all could compile questions and comments, and either, I believe it's a Google document, you can add comments directly, or you could email them to me and we can compile them that way. Sharon?
Yeah, let's do it that way. Let's put it if it's on a Google Doc where we can make comments.
Okay.
And then we can bring it to a regular meeting as opposed to doing another working group. I mean, that's just
I don't think we need a full working group if everybody, really this was to make everybody aware that we're working on this and gather the input. And just so you know where this came from, it's not out of nowhere. The noise board adopted the exact same document. So it's just something that unfortunately has been lacking from the city level coming down to boards and commissions. So DSD actually initiated through the noise board this idea that we need a little more guidance, which I'm, as you guys know, I'm like, give me all the guidance we can get for leading and proceeding through these meetings. So
will you send the link for the Google Doc?
It should be linked. So if you go to the agenda.
I did.
And it should be a live link.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's how I printed it. Okay.
Yep. And if there's, email me if you have access problems.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, cool. So then hopefully this is the fun part. Yay. So planning and priorities. So I just really wanted to open it up. What do we want to work on? We have our, budget and policy groups going. We're going to work on fee and lieu, work behind the scenes with city staff to gather some of those metrics. What else do you guys see as our, goals for the upcoming year? And so whoever wants to jump in. All right, Sharon.
Do we want to form a working group on the boards and commissions issue as a UFC position?
So I don't know about this. So, I've heard from other boards and commissions that they want to do a resolution and oppose it and all of this. And I mean, obviously we can, if someone from the group wants to bring a motion at a regular meeting that we as a group oppose this, we can consider it. I'm a little conflicted on that. I mean, maybe because it just seems too obvious to me that someone on a board and commission would be opposed to that. On the other hand, I do see some of the issues that they're trying to alleviate with city staff time and things like that. But is this the right way? Could it be, So, I don't know if that's something we want to try to work on and tackle as a group, or do we, again, bring a motion at a regular meeting, or do we all, participate and send our comments up through the channels that exist right now? So I'm open to that.
Yeah, and the argument on it is, as I said in my focus group, we don't need staff. We're a highly functioning boards and commission. I'm on another board and commission that is ambiguous. And I said my other board and commission is less functional, then UFC is extremely functional. We don't need a staff member at every meeting unless it's to log us into Zoom meetings. And if we have questions, we know that we can compile them and send them to a staff member. We are a very high functioning board and commission. My other board and commission I'm on, not so much. It may be redundant with some others. So I agree that there's some restructuring that needs to be done. But in our case, to eliminate, and I'm going to use SACE because I've talked with the people on SACE, same thing. You can't glomp us all in and get anything done from SACE or for us. So it's my position that we on the UFC should make some kind of statement. Now, if you want me to bring it up in the meeting in March, I can do that. But I do believe that we should come up with some kind of statement. And again, we're a very, very good working group and we're doing an excellent job. There are some that maybe aren't as well formed and organized as we are, but it would be a shame to lose us for sure.
Sure. So it seems most appropriate to me to have that as a regular meeting item.
Okay.
So if somebody wants to
I'll bring it up.
Bring a motion to the table, then we can vote as a group, because that way then it's from the group.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, of course, as individuals, we use the other route. So, and again, I don't know if a working group would be necessary for that project. You know what I mean? If at some point they are seeking more guidance, of a different way to restructure it, and we want to be a part of that, that might be something we would work on as a working group, if that makes sense. But at this point, they're not seeking that input,
Well, actually, they are. They're actually on the focus group and all the information I'm getting. They're wanting
other options.
Yes, absolutely. They're wanting to know how our group is functioning, as opposed to, what makes us function. And
right, and I agree with that. But are we going to?
What will happen if we're not? What will happen if we're not?
Right.
What effectiveness in the community there will be, in my opinion, will be no. So I think we do need to have, and I don't know whether you want to bring that up for open discussion, but I think we need to formulate, if nothing else, a position.
Right, and let's do that at our regular meeting then, so we can put it on the agenda. Someone can bring a motion. You can either write that beforehand or at the meeting.
Okay.
But again, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see the need for a full working group at this point. So
I'd rather catch it ahead of time, and instead of trying to play and catch up at the end.
We'll see. Ed had a hand up. Was it on this topic, or you have other ideas?
Yeah, well, yeah. Just to finish our thoughts on this topic, I agree with what you're both saying, that we should address the issues individuals where we have opportunities, but we do need to formulate a board position on this and communicate it formally to the city, in a position that would include both missed opportunities and consequences, as well as the work that we're doing right now. So, and I also agree that it shouldn't be a working group, but the entire body should be working on this and discussing it. As far as other working groups, I think we already talked about a fee in lieu, and I think we should hit the ground running with that, particularly because some opportunities are out there hanging like chads, like Ravenscroft, that we could jump on. And then there's that 800-pound gorilla, which is the Urban Forest Master Plan, which, if we do get funding for it, I would like to be intimately involved with that process from the beginning. The acquisition of consultants through the crafting of the structure of the plans, right through the very end, and stakeholder input in the whole thing. So, if we do get funding for that, I think everybody on this team should be prepared to be involved. And I think that in and of itself will probably justify our existence, at least through, bringing that plan to fruition. So, it's probably too premature, except that a working group could probably start thinking about what the structure of the plan looks like. We've already had conversations around that. And I know that Greenworks is already doing some early stakeholder engagement work on this. So I don't think it's too soon to really roll up our sleeves on it.
Awesome. That's a great ideas.
And then one last thought: if we don't get funding, then there's other ways that we can start incrementally working on this thing. So,
well, like Mark pointed out, we might be able to do some inventory work or
yeah.
coordinate. Not like but coordinate some of these pieces. Yeah.
Sure, and we have a growing army of tree keepers that we could call to arms. So let's see what happens.
Okay. I like that. Dawn?
Yep. Two things. One is with the boards and commissions. When we bring up, how effective we are, that could be turned into a counter argument that we would, for one, we could bring that effectiveness in together with other groups and be, sharing our effectiveness. And another thing, what was I going to say about that? Well, no, I think that was it for that part. But then also part of the proposed plan for boards and commissions was to have working groups, and that those working groups would work on some discrete project, and then when it was done, it would dissolve. And so I know that that's going to come up too. So I think as we go forward, in the next meeting for the Urban Forestry Commission, if we're talking about our stance or making a statement about it, I think, like Ed suggested earlier, is like what would be lost? What are the lost opportunities if this group goes away? And not just say like, this is all the great stuff that we do, because people will find a way to like, well, you can do it in this other, avenue, channel. But something to keep in mind is that there are these other working groups. I don't think something like alternative compliance can be channeled into a working group, but maybe some of the other things that we are doing already as working groups would continue if this came to pass.
Yeah, good point. Go ahead, Perrin.
Yeah, Don, in response to that idea of like continuing our effective work through consolidated groups, I think that's part of our problem that we have to address, is that the consolidation itself is what would hinder our effectiveness, in the sense that, I don't have all this memorized about the groups that would remain, but I seem to remember, basically the only category that both UFC and planning and zoning would fit into, we would end up in the same bucket, basically. And who do we think would have more power in that group once all the people who get to make the decisions are handpicked from the UFC and planning and zoning? And when they get that process done, of course, planning and zoning is the most powerful commission that there is. It's the most powerful commission I can think of. And they certainly would be more influential than anyone from UFC would be. And because our interests are not aligned in a lot of cases and are really run up against each other in many cases, it would put our priorities in the position of being subordinated to the priorities of planning and zoning. And so I think that's the point that we have to make about why it's not it doesn't make sense for us to be glommed in with these other groups, and we need to retain our unique identity.
And I know you said you didn't review it in detail, but planning and zoning is quasi-judicial, so they remain kind of no matter what because of their specific functions, which again is an argument for the Urban Forestry Commission. We do have specific functions that other boards and commissions don't have, even though we're not quasi-judicial, and we probably don't really want to be, but highlighting the unique work that we do, with alternative compliance and TRC specifically is super important. One thing I want to point out with that, and then I'll get you, Patrick, at the first meeting that Patrick and Don and I were at, they actually used the fact that I went to SACE to get support for the budget request. They said that that was overlapping work, and I was quick to point out that that was not overlapping work. It was to show broad-based support for a community-based initiative. And so we just have to really, again, if we're going to write something up the line, highlighting that, it's not that we're overlapping. We are working our best to collaborate and be broad-based and, gather community support that we drive up the line. So anyway, that's just my point on that. I was just shocked that they pulled that out as the example of overlapping work. So anyway, sorry, Patrick, go ahead. Patrick, you're on mute.
I think of the 4 advisory boards that they are currently recommending, the work that we do would most likely fall into the Healthy Environment and Livable Community Advisory Group. And while Planning and Zoning, Board of Adjustments, some other, as Don said, quasi-judiciary boards and commissions will remain intact, it will be really critical about, and I think this is what Perrin's point was, is would it be very critical on who gets on these advisory committees in terms of whether the council is looking at these advisory boards as balanced, or whether they look at them and in terms of how we can pack certain boards to get the kind of outcomes that we as a city council wants. So there's just a lot of dangerous areas in what is being proposed by the city at this point.
All right. I think we all agree on where we stand on boards and commissions. Let's dial in our statement, as a group. If somebody wants to start drafting something, maybe this is where we need a very short-term working group, but I don't know how we want to go about writing up that statement. If someone wants to take the lead.
Well, I'm sure Cecil will want to have a say in this. I know this is like he's on fire about this right now. Right. And I have jotted down 4 big ideas for the things that seem relevant to us. And that is Tree City USA designation, reversing the flow of ideas from bottom up, top down, replacing the people who show up now with people who aren't showing up yet, and then combining bodies with opposed interests in a way that can stifle the functioning that we have as distinct entities right now. So those are kind of the big ideas that just I personally had written down. I'm happy to spitball with other people and try to come up with something. I'm not sure if anybody else is interested in doing that, but
yeah, I am. I wrote down a couple of pages when I was asked for the, I've got institutional memory and continuity, and our working groups reassigned, and the basic structure that they have now, how it's really not workable, and so I've got 2 pages of notes on that.
Okay.
So I'm verbose. I need it cut down, but I've got some. So yeah, I'd be happy to work on that.
Okay.
Those are all good points, and I would leave it to you guys to do the writing, but we all have to recognize that we're at a critical juncture in Asheville with our urban forestry program. Yes. And that we're right at the precipice of going from nothing to having a program. And the Urban Forestry Commission is backed up with professional critical expertise that doesn't otherwise exist within the community. And it would just take a tremendous amount of wind out of our sails if we didn't exist. So it's this momentum thing that I'm
Mhm.
feeling that we just can't afford to lose.
Mhm.
So I think a part of that is we have a double-edged sword here. We want to push for our existence without over pushing our hand to get the other things that we want. So we have to carefully state, in my opinion, whatever we're going to put into this document that we send up.
Yep. You know, I've always said my job is to put myself out of business. It's the day when you're not needed is like when you know you're finally there.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So did anybody want to work with Perrin and Sharon to start off this? Obviously, it'll come back to the whole commission for editing and review, but anybody else want to join in?
Cecil probably will when he wakes
Yeah, if you
up.
guys want to contact him.
Yeah, I'll email Cecil.
Okay.
I've already emailed him, told him to wake up, but that didn't work.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I'll send you all what I've sent up as well, just so we have, thoughts together. And then let's bring it, obviously to the group when you have a draft, and we can work on revision. So cool. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Andy.
Okay. All right. So we'll call that a working group, hopefully very temporary, that we can get that going. The fee in lieu working group. So we've already outlined me, Ed, and Zoe for now. I like the idea of an urban forest master plan working group that can at least start with behind the scenes. Y'all know I'm way into that, so I would love to be a part of that. So I think we should go ahead and get that set up and at least have preliminary discussions. So I would like to be a part of that if possible. Ed, who else? Zoe? Did I miss anyone? All right. Well, then we can just have one meeting and get both of those things going. So that's good. Okay, so opening it back up to anyone who hasn't had a chance. Any other goals or priorities? And it doesn't necessarily have to be something that we would put into a working group right now, but what else might be on the table for us? I really liked Mark's idea of some sort of focus on planting and education in the community. Again, I don't think we are we're not a nonprofit. We're not doing that community-based work, because there's a lot to it. To do a private property tree planting in a neighborhood, there is a lot of background to it. You want people in that neighborhood on the ground gathering support. I mean, there's a lot of work in the background, but we could be a part of helping with that, coordinating funding, things like that. But go ahead, Ed.
yeah, I mean, I really have to give Greenworks the nod on their professional expertise in facilitating neighborhood scale tree planting projects. But maybe there's a way that we could better galvanize our relationship with Greenworks and stand behind them and be visible during their projects and efforts. For example, the March tree giveaway, is it Don? Late March. Right?
April.
April, you're right. It would be really cool if members of the Urban Forestry Commission were there volunteering, helping Greenworks with the work that they did. I mean, we can do activities like that, but I would really trust Greenworks to do the neighborhood stuff.
Absolutely. Well, and then part of the fee in lieu, if it doesn't all go to, public planting, obviously acquisition, but there is a piece in there we could potentially, even if it's a small amount, but getting the city involved in funding and helping shows that engagement.
I think that's an important role for us, and we can play a role in the Arbor Day celebration, things like that, to be visible, helping the city represent themselves in some of these community activities.
Yeah, I wrote it down as planting and community outreach, because I kind of see those as the tie together.
Mm-hmm.
I know in the past we had a sort of a communications working group. It was really geared toward budget. But I don't know if anybody wanted to have a group to get together to talk about these ideas, or if we just kind of, keep talking about it regularly as something that we coordinate with Greenworks primarily. Go ahead, Don.
I think that the place for those kind of working groups would be the Tree Protection Task Force. And I think that we have the Tree Protection Task Force, which is housed at Greenworks and run by Greenworks, has a lot more flexibility and can do what it wants. You know, we don't have to report back to anyone. We can do the education and outreach and come up with our own plans. And I think that, you know, the Urban Forestry Commission is already, our members are already overtaxed with the amount of things that we have to do. So I would be hesitant to ask for more from our members. At the same time, a lot of the members are also on the Tree Protection Task Force. So there is an outlet for that. Just on a side note too, I would just want to make it known that, you know, Greenworks does have formal relationships with the city. We are a partner. Lots of times folks mistake us for being part of the city until they find out that we're not. They're really surprised. But sometimes in conversations or discussions, it comes up as like Greenworks is listed as, you know, like one of the tree planting partners. And I have to say, we are the only tree planting partner in Buncombe County. You know, there is no other partner that, I mean, folks can do tree planting, but that is a core part of our mission and our work. And I tend to get offended when we're lumped together with like, oh, one of the community organizations. We are the community organization when it comes to trees. So just like us to remember that.
That's a good point. And I do want to add that, you know, we during the Tree Protection Task Force, we do give an Urban Forestry Commission update. It would be nice to, during that update, to ask the task force for help or give them some direction, because they have a lot of energy and they're looking for things to do to make a difference. So
yeah, you know, I make it a point to go as, you know, the chair and be at those meetings. And, you know, I kind of take a step back, because what I'm really looking for is that bottom up, you know, for them to feed the commission goals and priorities, you know, but absolutely open to, you know, being maybe a nudge from the other direction. So,
or just say, we need help. You know, we have this boards and commission restructuring coming up, and we need to hear your voice. You know, I think.
Well, yeah, and we definitely reach out for those issues. So, so yeah, I'm happy to be, you know, maybe a little more direct in that direction. But just so you know where I'm coming from when I'm giving those updates, it's really, I'm kind of looking for it to come from the bottom up, from the other side. So.
And also, Don, if you need our help, ask for it. Yeah, because I mean, we may be able to do it, and then we may not. But you know, if we on this commission can help Greenworks, I mean, you're going to be here regardless. We're all going to rotate off of this, and you're still stuck with this.
Thanks, Sharon. Yeah, I do reach out. I grab people to be on our board, like Ed. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm talking about the physical aspect of things.
Oh.
You know, I heard physical things that Mark was asking for.
Yeah, yeah. And
I know that Greenworks needs the physical aspect of things as well. So when I heard Mark ask for things from us, I thought, well, what's he asking for?
Yeah. I mean,
it was ambiguous for me. Yeah.
We have partnered in a way, sometimes with the city. We have to contract as like a contractor to do things. Like we did a tree planting. We planted 40 trees in the city as a contract several years ago. But it doesn't always align with the way that we do work, because we like to partner with communities and bring out volunteers, and the contract approach is just like get the trees in the ground as efficiently as possible. And so working with volunteers is definitely not as efficient as possible. But it's to, you know, all the other reasons we work with volunteers and to build community engagement. So where it makes sense, where we're not like hired as a contractor for the city, like landscaping crew, then I think it works well. And you know, and I appreciate all that Mark brought up, and some of it I don't think is I'm glad that the commission knows about it, but it's more of like Mark and I working out the details of a partnership than this group. Sorry, Perrin, I know you've had your hand up for a while.
That's good. Yeah, go ahead, Perrin.
No, not at all. Good conversation. And I just wanted to, if we are done with the last topic, I don't want to cut that conversation off, but I do have another idea. And this is just still floating around out there. And it's how exploring over the course of this year as the reparations process progresses to see if there is an opportunity for reforestation of, you know, the hardest hit neighborhoods from canopy loss in Asheville through the reparations process. And I want to be clear that I'm aware that we can't walk into that process with an agenda, so to speak, and try to like push our agenda through the reparations process. But I think it might be worth attending and listening and looking for opportunities for collaboration and crossover where people who are interested in addressing those issues who live in those neighborhoods might be interested in making common cause around reforestation in those areas of the city. So that's still, you know, the reparations process has been kind of frozen all this time. And I have seen little signs of things moving along down the line with it. So if anybody hears anything about things actually starting, please holler.
Yeah, actually, next month, I think it's gonna be March. Amber Weaver with Sustainability Office will be talking to us about the Climate Justice Initiative. And a piece of that, not necessarily trees in the ground. You know, I definitely see where you're going. Ooh, okay. What we're looking at there is they've put together an equity framework that city projects will be using to make decisions. And so I'm going to have Amber talk to us about that a bit. That kind of ties in with that. So they are moving forward with some of those issues and topics. And so we'll get an update on that. But you make a very good point. You know, what else could we do to be helpful and informative and, you know, assist with those projects? But we will have a little bit more on that, actually, I believe the March, and if not March, it's April meeting. So, but anything else around that? I agree with Perrin that could be a role that we play as well. All right. Anybody else? We're getting tired. It's been a long meeting.
I'd like to go to council. Are we almost done?
Yeah, I think we're there. So that's really the wrap up. So we will meet for our regular meeting. So on, you know, starting next agenda, we'll have our new working groups on there. So the new one is really Ed and Zoe and I. So we'll get together and get those two started. And then the other working groups, you know, continue with your work and report back as we make progress. So I think our biggest push right this minute is this budget request. So everything we can do to, you know, at this point, it'll be leveraging our community activists, anything we can do as a group, meeting with city council members. So that personally, I think that's our number one push for the next couple months. So we'll talk about that more, but thank you so much, everybody. I don't think, do we need to motion to adjourn this meeting? Or Nancy, do you know, or we can just end?
I think if everybody agrees, you can just end.
This is just a retreat. Yeah. When we're in person, it would just be.
Adios. Thank you,
So
Amy.
thank you so much. We'll see you very soon for our regular